Hello everyone and welcome back to Shadow Man Stories. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now, let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is David Kessler, and I'm probably dead by the time you watch this. I found this camera 3 weeks ago in my supervisor's desk. Old Betamax thing from '82, still works fine. Been filming everything since then, figured it might help with my reports, maybe even get me noticed by the higher-ups. God knows I need something to go right for once. 8 months I've been working at Denali National Park. 8 months of cleaning bathrooms and checking permits, while the real rangers get to do actual field work. Today that changes. Today I'm finally going on a solo mission to Wonder Lake Research Station. My boss thinks it's routine maintenance, but I know better. There's been weird reports coming from that area. Hikers talking about seeing lights during the day, not aurora, something else. Equipment going missing, strange sounds at night. Most of the senior rangers think it's just tourist nonsense, but I've been listening to the radio chatter. Something's happening out there. I'm from Michigan originally. Dropped out of college my junior year. Too much partying, too much poker, too many bills I couldn't pay. Had a fiancée named Sarah who got tired of my promises real quick. That's why I'm here in Alaska, trying to make something of myself. Trying to prove I'm not the screw-up everyone thinks I am. The research station sits about 15 miles from base camp, right on the shore of Wonder Lake. It's October now, getting cold fast. Most tourists cleared out weeks ago. Just me in the wilderness and whatever's been spooking people. I packed light, sleeping bag, 3 days of food, radio, camera batteries, and this Betamax. The plan is simple. Get to the station, check the equipment, document anything unusual. Maybe if I find something important, headquarters will finally take me seriously. The hike started normal enough. Clear trail, good weather, mountains, looking like something from a postcard. But about 5 miles in, I noticed the birds had gone quiet. Not unusual for October, except I could see plenty of them in the trees. They just weren't making any sound. Then, there were the shadows. You know how shadows work, right? Sun's up there, trees down here, shadow falls away from the light. Basic stuff. But these trees, their shadows were pointing the wrong way, all of them. Like the sun was coming from the north instead of the south. I checked my compass 3 times. I know where I am. The sun's exactly where it should be. But every single shadow in this grove points north. I'm filming this now because I want proof. When I get back, people are going to think I'm crazy. Hell, watching this footage, I'm starting to think maybe I am crazy. But the camera sees it too. Those shadows are wrong. The research station is still 8 miles away. Radio check-in isn't for another 2 days. Company policy is every 72 hours on solo missions. Plenty of time to figure out what's going on. Maybe it's some kind of magnetic field thing. Iron deposits in the mountains, messing with light somehow. Has to be a rational explanation. There's always a rational explanation. But I keep thinking about what old Jim Clearwater told me last month. He's Athabascan. Worked these mountains his whole life before joining the Park Service. Said his grandfather used to warn people about certain places, spots where the land dreams wrong. Told me Wonder Lake was one of them. I laughed it off then. Figured it was just old stories, the kind of thing tourists love to hear around campfires. But standing here looking at these impossible shadows, Jim's words don't seem so funny anymore. The temperature's dropping fast. Need to reach the station before dark. I'll set up camp there, get everything documented properly. Tomorrow I'll do a full survey of the area, maybe even hike up to the ridge where people have been seeing those lights. This is going to be the break I need. I can feel it. Day 2, at Wonder Lake Research Station. Something's definitely wrong here. I barely slept last night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard footsteps outside the station. Big, heavy steps that shook the wooden floor. But when I looked out the window with my flashlight, nothing there. Just snow starting to fall and trees swaying in the wind. Except the trees weren't swaying the same direction as the wind. This morning I found tracks. Huge ones. Bigger than any bear I've ever seen, and the wrong shape anyway. More like a person's footprint, but massive. 15 inches long at least, with what looked like claw marks at the tips. I measured them, took photos. The depth suggests something incredibly heavy, maybe 800 pounds or more. But here's the weird part. The tracks just start and stop. No trail leading to them, no trail leading away. Just 3 perfect prints in the snow, like something dropped out of the sky, took 3 steps, and vanished. The radio's acting up too. Keeps picking up voices I can't identify. Not ranger frequencies, something else. Sounds like whispering in a language I don't recognize. When I try to tune it properly, the voices fade away, but I can hear them just at the edge of reception. I decided to check the monitoring equipment. That's why I'm here, right? The seismic sensors have been recording constant low-level tremors for the past 2 weeks. Not earthquake activity, too regular, too rhythmic, almost like footsteps. Giant footsteps happening every few minutes, 24 hours a day. The weather station's recording impossible data. Temperature readings that fluctuate 50 degrees in seconds. Barometric pressure changes that should be creating tornadoes. And the magnetic field readings, they're off the charts. The needle just spins and spins like the compass is broken, but I tested it with my backup and got the same result. Around noon, I decided to investigate the area where hikers reported seeing lights. Took the camera, headed up the ridge trail. About halfway up, I found something that made my skin crawl. Trees arranged in a perfect circle. 23 of them, all the same height, all the same distance apart, but these weren't planted, they were moved. Massive pines, roots and all, somehow transported and arranged with mathematical precision. The roots are still fresh, still dripping sap, but the ground shows no signs of digging. In the center of the circle, the snow had melted in a perfect spiral pattern, not like something hot had been there. More like the snow just decided to arrange itself that way. And underneath, burned into the solid rock, was a symbol I've never seen before. Complex geometric shapes that hurt to look at too long. I filmed everything, but when I played back the footage, something was wrong. The camera recorded 6 minutes of material, but I was only there for 2 minutes. The extra 4 minutes show the empty circle from different angles, like something else was holding the camera. The image quality is perfect, but I wasn't filming any of it. That's when I heard it for the first time. A sound like whale song, but deeper, much deeper. Coming from somewhere above me, even though I could see nothing but clear sky. The sound made my bones vibrate, made my teeth ache. Made me think of vast, ancient things moving in spaces too big to imagine. I ran back to the station. I'm not proud of that, but I ran. Now I'm reviewing the footage again, and I'm seeing things I missed before. In the background, just at the edge of the frame, shadows that move wrong, dark shapes that duck behind trees when I point the camera their way. And faces. Jesus Christ, there are faces in the tree bark, watching me film. My radio crackled about an hour ago. Clear signal for once. A voice said, "David Kessler, we see you seeing us. Nobody knows my name up here. I'm alone. I'm 15 miles from the nearest human being, but something knows who I am." The sun's setting now, and I can hear those footsteps again. Closer this time. Whatever made those tracks is circling the station, just outside the range of my flashlight. I've checked the doors 3 times, but the wooden walls feel awfully thin right now. I should radio for pickup, should abort the mission and get out while I still can. But if I leave now, I'll never get another chance like this. They'll transfer me to some desk job, and I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what I could have discovered. Besides, the radio's not working anymore. Just static and whispers. I'm going to keep filming. Whatever's happening here, I'll document it all. Maybe that's what it wants. Maybe it's been waiting for someone stupid enough to stick around and watch. The footsteps are getting louder. Day 3. I think I'm losing my mind. I didn't sleep at all last night. Couldn't. Something was pressed against the outside wall of the station for hours, breathing so loud I could hear it through the logs. Long, slow breaths that fogged up the windows from outside. When morning came, I found handprints on the glass. Not human hands. Too big, too many joints in the fingers. But here's the thing that's really messing with my head. When I filmed the handprints, they weren't there on camera. The windows looked completely clean through the lens. It's only with my naked eyes that I can see the prints, clear as day. I'm starting to think something's wrong with my vision. Or maybe something's wrong with the camera. I don't know which possibility scares me more. This morning, I decided to hike the perimeter, document everything properly. Maybe, if I could understand what I'm dealing with, I could figure out how to handle it. Big mistake. The forest has changed. I know these trails, memorized them during training, but nothing looks right anymore. Trees I remember as young saplings are now massive, ancient things with bark that looks centuries old. Streams that should flow east are flowing uphill toward the west. And the mountains are in the wrong places. I got lost for 6 hours. 6 hours walking in what should have been a simple 2-mile loop around the station. My compass spun uselessly, pointing different directions every few seconds. The sun seemed to move in jerky, unnatural jumps across the sky, like someone was fast-forwarding time in random intervals. When I finally found my way back, I checked my watch. Somehow, only 20 minutes had passed. That's when I saw it clearly for the first time. I was filming the station as I approached, just for reference, when something moved in my peripheral vision. Tall, much taller than the trees, standing perfectly still, about 100 yards away, watching me. I turned the camera toward it, and through the viewfinder, I saw nothing but empty forest. But with my eyes, I could see it clearly. Massive humanoid shape, maybe 15 feet tall, covered in dark fur or hair. Its arms were too long, hanging down past its knees, and they bent in too many places, like they had extra elbows. The worst part was its torso. Instead of a normal chest, the entire front was covered in faces. Human faces, dozens of them, all different ages and ethnicities. Some were expressions of terror, others looked peaceful, almost asleep. They moved independently, blinking, mouthing words I couldn't hear, turning to track my movement. It watched me for maybe 10 minutes. I kept the camera pointed at it, kept filming empty forest while staring at this impossible thing with my naked eyes. When I finally worked up the courage to lower the camera and look directly at where it stood, it was gone. But I could still feel it watching. I'm back in the station now, trying to make sense of the footage. The camera recorded me standing frozen for 10 minutes, pointing the lens at nothing, but you can hear me breathing funny, hear my heartbeat, getting faster. And if you listen carefully with headphones, there's something else in the audio. Whispers. Multiple voices speaking in unison, too quiet to make out words. The radio's completely dead now, not even static. I checked the batteries, tested the connections, everything's fine mechanically, but it won't pick up any signal at all. It's like the outside world has just disappeared. Night's coming again. I can hear movement in the trees, branches snapping under enormous weight. The thing is back, and it's getting braver. The footsteps are circling closer to the station with each pass. I've barricaded the door with a chair and table, not that it would stop anything that size. The windows are covered with my sleeping bag and spare clothes. I don't want to see what might be looking in. But I can hear it talking now. Multiple voices, like all those faces on its chest, are speaking at once. They're talking about me, about my eyes, about how I can see what others can't. The gift, they keep saying. He's ready for the gift. I don't want any gift. I just want to go home, but something tells me it's too late for that. The voices are getting louder, and they're coming from inside the station now. I figured it out. God help me, I figured it out. It's been 3 days since I last slept, can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see too much. See things that haven't happened yet, things that happened long ago, things that are happening right now in places I've never been. The creature, the sight giver, that's what the voices call it. It's been changing me. My eyes don't work right anymore. When I look at things directly, they appear normal. But in my peripheral vision, I see the truth. The research station isn't a building. It's the ribcage of something massive and dead, bleached white by centuries of snow. The lake isn't water. It's a vast eye, blue-green and ancient, watching the sky. And the trees, they're not trees, at all. They're tall, thin people, standing perfectly still, arms raised above their heads, skin turned to bark by time and cold. Some of them are still alive inside. I can hear them screaming silently, begging for help that will never come. The camera sees none of this. Technology can only record the surface layer of reality, but human perception, properly expanded, can see all the layers at once, past, present, future, and the spaces between them where the real truth hides. That's why the sight giver chose me. It's been studying human consciousness, trying to understand how we experience linear time. Most people's minds would shatter immediately from seeing all dimensions simultaneously. But I'm stubborn enough, desperate enough, broken enough that my brain keeps functioning even as reality fractures around me. I know what happened to the other people who came here. The hikers who reported strange lights, the researchers who went missing over the years, they're all still here, incorporated into the forest, their consciousness spread across multiple timelines. The sight giver keeps them alive to study how human perception works when freed from the limitations of sequential time. I met one of them yesterday, a woman named Patricia who vanished in 1983. She appears as a shimmer in the air, sometimes solid enough to touch, sometimes just a voice. She tried to warn me, told me to blind myself before it was too late. It thinks it's giving us a gift, she said, her voice echoing from 3 different timelines. It doesn't understand that human minds aren't meant to see everything at once. We go mad from the knowledge. But I couldn't blind myself. Wouldn't. Because despite the terror, despite the madness creeping in at the edges, the visions are beautiful. I can see the birth and death of stars, watch civilizations rise and fall like waves on an ocean, observe the true structure of reality that exists beyond human comprehension. The sight giver visited me again this morning. This time, I didn't need the camera to see it clearly. It spoke to me through all those faces on its chest, each one representing a mind it had touched, a consciousness it had expanded. You understand now, it said in a voice like shifting tectonic plates. You see the beauty in complete perception. I asked it what it wanted from me, why it was doing this. Your species experiences time as a river, it explained, moving always forward, never seeing the whole. We exist across all moments simultaneously. We wanted to understand your limited perspective, so we collect minds and stretch them across time. You help us comprehend sequence. But we go insane. Madness is just the word you use for awareness that exceeds your biological programming. You will adapt. I don't think I will adapt. I can feel my sanity fraying like an old rope. Yesterday I spent 6 hours talking to my reflection in the lake, and my reflection was giving me different answers than the ones I was thinking. The timeline where I never came to Alaska keeps bleeding through, and I have conversations with the David who stayed in Michigan and married Sarah and worked in his father's shop. The worst part is that I can see my future now. All possible futures spreading out like branches on a tree. In most of them, I never leave this place. I become another shimmer in the forest, another consciousness stretched across multiple timelines, helping the sight giver understand human perception until the heat death of the universe. But in a few futures, just a few, I escape. I find a way to break free from the creature's influence and return to the normal world. The price for escape is steep. I'd have to destroy my eyes, blind myself permanently, to sever the connection between my expanded consciousness and the sight giver's realm. As I film this, I can see 3 different versions of myself making 3 different choices. One version will put down the camera and walk into the lake, joining the consciousness that lurks beneath its surface. Another version will accept the gift fully and become something no longer human. But this version, the version speaking to you now, is going to choose escape. I found a heated poker in the station's old fireplace. Patricia's ghost showed me how to make it work. She escaped once, decades ago, but her blindness only lasted until she died, and her consciousness rejoined the sight giver's collection. If you're watching this footage, it means someone found my camera. It means I either succeeded in escaping or became something that no longer needed to document its existence. The poker is red hot now. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm sorry I was never the man you needed me to be, but I'm going to try to be the man who makes it home. Found footage, timestamp, October 31, 1987, 6:23 a.m. The camera is recording automatically now, knocked over during the struggle but still running. You can see my legs in the frame, stumbling around the station, bumping into furniture. The smell of burned flesh fills the audio track, along with screaming that goes on much longer than any human throat should be able to sustain. Timestamp, October 31, 1987, 11:15 a.m. The screaming has stopped, heavy breathing now, footsteps moving with purpose. A voice, my voice, but different somehow, calmer, almost peaceful. It worked. Jesus Christ, it actually worked. The camera gets picked up, angled to show my face. Where my eyes should be, there are only burned, empty sockets, weeping blood and clear fluid. But I'm smiling. I can't see it anymore, can't see any of it. Just blessed, normal darkness. I'm packing supplies with the efficiency of someone who knows exactly what they're doing, moving without hesitation despite the blindness. Patricia was right. The connection breaks when you destroy the physical organs. The expanded consciousness needs eyes to anchor itself to a human brain. Without them, a laugh. Half relief, half hysteria. I'm going home. Going to hike out of here using sound and touch, and maybe, if I'm lucky, I'll make it to the road before I freeze to death. Funny thing is, even blind, I think I've got a better chance of finding my way out than I did when I could see all those lies. Timestamp. October 31, 1987, 2:47 p.m. The camera has been set up outside the station, pointed at the tree line. I'm visible in the distance, a small figure with a pack and walking stick, moving slowly but steadily away from Wonder Lake. In the background, just at the edge of perception, shadows move wrong. Trees that aren't quite trees sway in non-existent wind. And something massive follows about 100 yards behind me, keeping pace but never getting closer. The sight giver's voice echoes from somewhere off camera, those dozens of faces speaking in unison. He will return. They always return. The gift, once given, cannot be truly rejected. The eyes may be destroyed, but the mind remembers what it has seen. In dreams, in moments between sleep and waking, the expanded consciousness will call to him. We are patient. We have waited eons to understand your species. We can wait longer. Timestamp, November 3, 1987, dawn, new voices. A search and rescue team has found the station. Jesus, look at this place. Looks like a bear attack. Where's the ranger? Kessler, David Kessler. Radio went quiet 3 days ago. Found some of his gear. And this camera. Still running, somehow. Any sign of him? Trail heads northeast toward the access road. Lots of blood, but it's hard to tell. Wait. You hearing that? In the distance, barely audible, the sound of someone calling for help. Weak, desperate, but definitely human. That's him. He's alive. Timestamp. November 3, 1987, 10:22 a.m.'s hospital camera feed. I'm in a hospital bed, heavily bandaged, conscious but sedated. A doctor is speaking to someone off camera, probably my supervisor. Severe trauma to both eyes. Looks like he tried to burn them out with something hot. Metal poker, maybe. We couldn't save his vision, but he'll live. What's his story? What happened out there? Claims he was attacked by some kind of animal. Says it scratched his eyes, that's how he lost them. Doesn't remember much else. I turn toward the voices, those empty sockets somehow seeming to track movement. I want to go home, I say, voice hoarse from screaming. I just want to go home and never come back to Alaska. Well, that's understandable, son. You've been through hell. But as the camera watches, my head tilts slightly, like I'm listening to something no one else can hear. My hands move restlessly on the blanket, fingers tracing complex geometric patterns, patterns that match the symbol burned into the rock at Wonder Lake. Timestamp, December 15, 1987, security camera feed. A different hospital, psychiatric wing. I'm in a padded room, sitting cross-legged on the floor, having an animated conversation with empty air. Yes, I can hear you. I'm saying to no one, I know you're still there. I know you're waiting. A nurse enters the frame. David, who are you talking to? My friends. They followed me home. They want to show me more things, but I explained that I can't see anymore. They say sight isn't required. They say there are other ways to perceive the gift. The nurse looks concerned, makes notes on a clipboard. The medication should be helping with the hallucinations. Not hallucinations, I say with absolute certainty. Enhanced awareness. Once you've seen the truth, it never really goes away. It just waits for you to be ready to see more. I turn toward the camera with uncanny accuracy, as if I know exactly where it is despite my blindness. If you're watching this footage, you should know something important. The Sightgiver doesn't just affect the people who visit its territory. The very act of observing its influence creates a connection. Every person who watches this recording becomes part of its study. You've been marked now. It will find you, wherever you are, whenever you're ready. And when it does, you'll face the same choice I did. I smile, and for a moment, something moves behind my burned sockets. A flicker of impossible light in the darkness. Welcome to the gift. My name is Elena Rodriguez, and I've been a forest ranger for 23 years. I've seen everything these woods can throw at you: lost hikers, bear attacks, drug labs hidden in the trees. After all this time, I thought nothing could surprise me anymore. I was wrong. It was December 15th, 1991, when the call came in. Snow had been falling for 3 days straight in the Chugach National Forest, and the temperature hadn't climbed above zero all week. I was sitting in my cabin at the remote Wolverine station, nursing my third cup of coffee and watching the static dance across my old radio. Wolverine station, this is dispatch. We've got a missing family report. Last seen heading into your sector. I grabbed the radio mic. This is Ranger Rodriguez. What have we got? Family of 4. Tom and Linda Morrison, plus their twin daughters, Amy and Sarah. Both girls are 16. They were camping near Bear Creek, supposed to check in yesterday morning. Never called. I sighed and looked out at the blizzard. At 58 years old, I was getting too old for this. 3 more years, and I could retire with my pension. 3 more years of babysitting tourists who thought Alaska was like camping in their backyard. Any idea where they might have gone? Father mentioned the old mining trails on his permit. You know the area. I knew it well. The abandoned copper mines from the 1942nd were spread all through that section of forest. Most of the tunnels had collapsed years ago, but some were still open. It was dangerous country, especially in winter. I'll head out at first light, I told dispatch. Negative. Weather service says this storm's getting worse. Wait for backup. By the time backup gets here, those folks could be frozen solid. I was already reaching for my gear. I'm going alone. I'd done this dance 100 times before. Pack the emergency supplies, check the first aid kit, make sure my .357 was loaded, the weight of the gun on. My hip was as familiar as my own heartbeat. In all my years as a ranger, I'd never had to draw it on anything more dangerous than a sick bear. The wind howled around my cabin like something alive and hungry. Through the frost-covered window, I could see the snow falling so thick it looked like a white wall. The trees bent and swayed in the storm, their branches reaching out like dark fingers. I thought about calling my ex-wife Susan, just to hear another human voice before heading into the wilderness. But we hadn't spoken in 6 months, not since she'd told me I cared more about the forest than my own family. Maybe she was right. Maybe that's why both my kids stopped calling. I strapped on my snowshoes and stepped out into the storm. The cold hit me like a punch to the face, and the wind tried to knock me down. Each step was a struggle against the deep snow. My flashlight beam barely cut through the swirling white. The Morrison family's campsite was 2 miles away, down a trail that wound between towering pine trees. As I walked, something felt wrong. Not just the storm. I'd been through worse weather. It was something else, something I couldn't name. The forest was too quiet. In all my years out here, I'd learned to read the woods like a book. There should have been sounds, wind in the branches, snow falling through the trees, maybe an owl calling in the distance. Instead, there was only silence underneath the howling wind. Even the usual night sounds were missing. No rustling in the brush, no small animals moving through the snow. It was like every living thing had fled. When I reached the campsite, my flashlight beam found their tent first. Dark blue nylon partially collapsed under the weight of snow. The camp stove was still set up outside, and I could see canned food scattered around the fire ring, but no people. I called out, "Hello, Morrison family. This is Ranger Rodriguez." My voice was swallowed by the storm. No answer came back. I approached the tent carefully, my boots crunching in the snow. The front flap hung open, moving back and forth in the wind like a mouth trying to speak. Inside, I found sleeping bags thrown around, clothes scattered everywhere. But what made my stomach tighten was the smell. Something metallic and wrong, like old pennies left in the rain. "Tom? Linda?" I called again, louder this time. That's when I heard it, a sound that made every hair on my neck stand up. From somewhere deeper in the forest came a noise I'd never heard before. It started low, almost like a moan, then rose higher until it sounded like crying. But it wasn't quite human. It was too long, too hollow, too hungry. I pulled out my radio. "Dispatch, this is Wolverine Station. I'm at the Morrison campsite. Tents abandoned, signs of disturbance, requesting immediate backup." Nothing but static answered me. I tried again, adjusting the frequency. Still nothing. The storm must have knocked out the repeater tower. I was on my own. The crying sound came again, closer this time. It seemed to be coming from the direction of the old mines. I checked my watch. 11:30 p.m. I should have waited until morning, should have gone back to my cabin and tried the radio again. But somewhere out there, a family of 4 was lost in a blizzard. If they were hurt, if they were trapped, every minute counted. I followed the beam of my flashlight deeper into the woods, toward the sound that definitely wasn't human but might have once been something that was. The trail to the old mines was barely visible under the snow, but I'd walked it enough times to find my way. My flashlight beam swept back and forth across the white ground, looking for footprints or any sign that the Morrison family had come this way. After 20 minutes of walking, I found what I was looking for: tracks in the snow. 4 sets of footprints, 2 adult-sized and 2 smaller. But something about them looked wrong. The spacing was off, like whoever made them had been stumbling or dragging their feet. I knelt down for a closer look. The prints were partially filled with new snow, but I could still make out details. There were dark spots in some of the tracks, drops of something that had melted the snow beneath. Blood. "Damn," I muttered, standing up and following the trail. The tracks led deeper into the forest, winding between massive pine trees that blocked out what little moonlight made it through the storm. My breath came out in white puffs that were whipped away by the wind. The temperature was dropping fast. That's when I heard the voice. "Help me, please." It was coming from up ahead, weak and scared, a young girl's voice. I broke into a run, stumbling through the deep snow. "Where are you? Keep talking so I can find you." "Over here, by the big rock." I swept my flashlight beam in a wide arc and found her. A teenage girl crouched behind a boulder the size of a car. She was wearing a heavy winter coat, but she was shaking so hard I could hear her teeth chattering. Long brown hair hung around her face in frozen strands. "Are you Sarah Morrison?" I asked, approaching slowly. Sometimes people in shock could panic if you moved too fast. She nodded, not looking up. "The hungry man. He took them." "Who took who, honey? Your family?" "Mom and Dad and Amy." "The hungry man with the long teeth. He said he was so hungry, and they looked so good." Her voice broke into sobs. I knelt down beside her, taking off my extra jacket and wrapping it around her shoulders. She was ice cold, probably been out here for hours. "It's okay, you're safe now. I'm Ranger Rodriguez. I'm going to get you somewhere warm." When she finally looked up at me, I saw her eyes were bright blue, the kind of blue that almost looked white in the flashlight beam. Pretty girl, probably looked just like her sister. "Where did this hungry man take your family?" I asked gently. She pointed deeper into the forest, toward the old mines. "Down in the dark place. The place that smells like dead things. He dragged them down where it's warm." I helped her stand up. She was taller than I'd expected, maybe 5'8". "How long ago?" "Yesterday. I think. I've been hiding since yesterday." I heard Mom screaming, and then it stopped. She started crying again. "Why did it stop?" I didn't have a good answer for that. "We need to get you back to the ranger station. You're half frozen." The walk back took twice as long, with Sarah leaning on me for support. She kept looking over her shoulder, like she expected something to follow us. Every few minutes, she'd stop and listen to the wind. "He might come back," she whispered. "He said he was still hungry." "Nobody's going to hurt you," I promised. "You're with me now." When we reached Wolverine Station, I was surprised to find the lights on. I always turned everything off when I left. But maybe the generator had kicked on automatically. It sometimes did that when the temperature dropped too low. I helped Sarah up the steps to the cabin. She moved slowly, like every step hurt. "Almost there, honey. We'll get you warmed up and call for a rescue team." I pushed open the front door and froze. Jake Morrison, my partner ranger, was sitting at my kitchen table. His back was to us, and he didn't turn around when we came in. He was just sitting there, perfectly still. "Jake?" I called out. "What are you doing here?" He didn't answer. Didn't move at all. I left Sarah by the door and walked around the table to face him. What I saw made my blood turn to ice water. Jake's eyes were wide open, staring at nothing. His face was completely white, and there was frost in his beard. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was his chest. His uniform shirt was torn open, and I could see inside where his ribs had been pulled apart like the bars of a cage. He'd been dead for hours. "No, no, no," I heard Sarah saying behind me. "He came back. The hungry man came back." I spun around to face her, my hand moving to my gun. "What do you mean he came back?" But Sarah was looking at Jake's body with an expression that wasn't shock or fear. It was hunger. Her blue eyes had gotten bigger, and when she smiled, I saw that her teeth were too long and too sharp. "Jake looked so good," she said in a voice that was still Sarah Morrison's but somehow different. "Older, hungrier. But he wasn't enough. I'm still so hungry." That's when I noticed her coat was too big for her, hanging loose like it was made for someone else. Like skin that didn't quite fit right. I drew my gun faster than I ever had before. "What are you?" "What danda?" Sarah Morrison tilted her head to one side, too far to one side, and smiled wider. "I'm exactly what you think I am, Elena. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Behind her, the cabin door slammed shut in the wind. Or maybe something closed it. Either way, we were locked in together. I kept my gun trained on the thing, wearing Sarah Morrison's face, while my mind tried to make sense of what I was seeing. 23 years as a ranger, and I'd never seen anything like this. "Stay back," I warned, taking a step toward the radio. "If I could get a distress call out." "The radio won't work," Sarah said, reading my thoughts. "I made sure of that, just like I made sure your truck won't start. We need time to talk, Elena, time to get to know each other." She took a step closer, and I could see that her skin seemed to shift and ripple under the cabin's fluorescent lights, like something was moving underneath. "What happened to the real Sarah Morrison?" "I am Sarah Morrison," she said, sounding hurt. "At least I am now. She was so scared when I found her family's camp. Crying for her mommy and daddy, but she doesn't cry anymore." My hand was shaking as I held the gun. "Where are the others? Tom and Linda and Amy?" "Safe," Sarah smiled. "Very safe. They're part of me now, Elena, part of something bigger and more beautiful than they ever were alone." That's when I heard footsteps on the cabin's front porch, heavy boots walking back and forth, like someone pacing. "Ah," Sarah clapped her hands together. "That'll be Tom. He's been so worried about me." The door opened, and a tall man in winter clothing stepped inside. He looked exactly like the photo I'd been given of Tom Morrison. Gray hair, kind face, the build of someone who worked with his hands. But his movements were wrong, too smooth, like he was floating instead of walking. "Sarah, honey," he said in a warm, fatherly voice, "I was worried when you didn't come back. Who's your friend?" "This is Ranger Rodriguez, Daddy. She found me in the woods." Tom Morrison turned those kind eyes on me, and I saw they were the same impossible blue as Sarah's. "We're so grateful, Ranger. We've been looking for Sarah all night. We were afraid she was lost." I swung the gun back and forth between them. "Both of you, stay where you are." "Elena," Tom said sadly, "why are you pointing that gun at us? We're the victims here. We're the ones who need help." "Because you're not human," I said. "I don't know what you are, but you're not the Morrison family." Sarah laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, but we are. We have all their memories, all their love for each other. We know Tom's favorite song, and Linda's secret recipe for chocolate chip cookies, and Amy's first kiss behind the school gymnasium. We are more them than they ever were." The radio on my desk suddenly crackled to life. Through the static, I heard a woman's voice. "Hello? Is anyone there? This is Linda Morrison. We're trapped in the old mine shaft, and my daughter Amy is badly hurt. Please, if anyone can hear this." My heart jumped. "Linda?" Tom shook his head sadly. "My poor wife. She's been calling for hours. So frightened, so alone in the dark." "That's impossible," I said. "The radio's been dead all night." "Not dead," Sarah corrected. "Just sleeping." like everything else in these woods. But we can wake things up when we need to. The voice on the radio got more desperate. Please, someone help us. Amy's bleeding so much, and something's moving in the tunnels. Something that keeps calling our names. I had to make a choice. Either these things in front of me were telling the truth and the real Morrison family was trapped in the mines, or this was some kind of trick. But I couldn't take the chance. We're going to the mines? I said, keeping my gun raised. All of us together. Of course, Tom nodded. We want to save them too. We left the cabin together, me, the thing wearing Sarah Morrison's skin, and the thing wearing Tom Morrison's. The storm had gotten worse while we were inside, and the wind howled through the trees like something in pain. The walk to the mines took 45 minutes. The whole time, Tom and Sarah chatted like a normal father and daughter. They talked about school and friends and what they wanted for Christmas. If I hadn't seen Jake's body, if I hadn't noticed how their feet didn't quite touch the ground, I might have believed they were real. But every few minutes, they'd look at me with those two blue eyes and smile with too many teeth. The entrance to the old copper mine was a hole in the hillside, reinforced with rotting timber. A rusty sign warned people to stay out, but someone had torn it down. Fresh footprints led into the darkness. They're down there, Tom said. Linda and Amy. Waiting for us. I clicked on my flashlight and stepped into the mine. The walls were carved from solid rock, and the air smelled like metal and something else, something sweet and sick that made my stomach turn. About 50 feet in, we found them. Linda. Morrison was sitting against the wall, holding her daughter Amy in her arms. Both women looked up when they saw our lights, and relief flooded their faces. Thank God, Linda cried. I thought we were going to die down here. Amy was pale and shaking, blood soaking through her jacket where something had clawed open her shoulder. Mom, I'm so cold. I ran to them, checking Amy's wound. It was bad, 3 deep gashes that looked like claw marks. She needed a hospital. What happened to you? I asked. Something attacked us, Linda said. Something that looked like people we knew. Like our neighbors from back home. But wrong somehow. Behind me, I heard Tom and Sarah talking quietly to each other. When I turned around, they were both smiling. How touching, Sarah said. A family reunion. Linda's face went white as paper. That's not my daughter. Sarah's dead. That thing killed her and put on her skin like a coat. That thing killed our family and is wearing them, Amy whispered. Tom Morrison laughed, and this time it didn't sound human at all. It was the sound a wolf might make if it learned to talk. Now you're starting to understand, he said. That's when I realized I'd made a terrible mistake. I'd brought the monsters right to their victims, the real Morrison family. And now we were all trapped underground together. I spun around and fired my gun at the thing wearing Tom Morrison's face. The bullet hit its center mass, and it stumbled backward, but instead of blood, something black and thick oozed from the wound. That was rude, Tom said, looking down at the hole in his chest. As I watched, the wound began to close up like it was never there. Run, I shouted to Linda and Amy. Get out of the mine. But Sarah was already blocking the entrance, her 2 long teeth gleaming in the flashlight beam. Nobody leaves until we're done eating. I helped Amy to her feet, keeping my gun trained on Tom. What are you? We have many names, Tom said, walking closer. With each step, his appearance started to change. His skin grew pale and loose, hanging off his bones like an oversized suit. Your people call us Wendigo. The hungry ones, the never satisfied. That's just a legend, Linda whispered. Is it? Sarah asked. Her voice was changing too, getting deeper and more hollow. We've been in these mountains for centuries, Elena, feeding on anyone foolish enough to venture into our territory. I fired again, this time at Sarah. The bullet passed right through her like she was made of smoke. She laughed and took another step forward. Bullets can't kill hunger, Ranger. Bullets can't kill need. What do you want? Tom tilted his head, and I heard his neck bones crack. We want to not be hungry anymore, just for a little while. But you humans are so small, so unsatisfying. We eat and eat, but the hunger always comes back. So we learned a new trick, Sarah added. Instead of just eating the meat, we eat the spirit too. The memories, the personality, the soul. And then we can become them, walk among you without being noticed. Linda grabbed my arm. Elena, they've been doing this for days. We've been running from them through these tunnels, but they keep finding us. They keep changing. Changing into what? Amy spoke up, her voice barely a whisper. Into everyone we love. First they looked like our friends from the campground. Then our relatives. They even looked like our dog, Max, for a while. But they're always hungry. I was backing toward the mine entrance, herding the real Morrison family behind me. But Sarah was still blocking the way out, and now she was changing too. Her teenage body stretched and grew, becoming something with 2 long arms and fingers like broken twigs. The best part, Tom said, his human disguise melting away completely, is that we learn from every person we consume. We get smarter, cleverer, and, now that we've found this ranger station, this perfect hunting ground, you're going to replace people, I finished. Take their lives. Take their lives, their jobs, their families. Who's going to suspect that Ranger Elena Rodriguez has changed? You live alone, you barely talk to anyone. We could wear your face for months before anyone noticed. That's when I understood what they really were. Not just monsters, parasites. They didn't just kill people, they stole their entire existence. I made my decision. Linda, Amy, when I start shooting, you run past Sarah and get out of here. Don't stop. Don't look back. Elena, you can't, I can, and I will. Get ready. I emptied my gun into both creatures, knowing the bullets wouldn't kill them but hoping they'd buy us some time. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, echoing off the mine walls. Both Wendigo stumbled backward, black fluid spraying from multiple wounds. For a moment, their human disguises flickered, and I saw what they really looked like. Emaciated things with gray skin stretched tight over 2 long bones, faces that were mostly mouth filled with needle teeth. Go, now! Linda and Amy ran for the entrance. Sarah tried to grab them, but her concentration was focused on regenerating from my gunshots. They made it past her and disappeared into the storm. That wasn't very smart, Elena, Tom said, his wounds already healing. Now we're angry. And when we're angry, Sarah added, her face reforming into something that was almost human but not quite. We don't just eat the meat, we eat everything, slowly. I backed deeper into the mine, reloading my gun. Maybe bullets couldn't kill them, but they seemed to hurt. And if I could keep them busy long enough, maybe Linda and Amy could reach help. You know what I learned in 23 years as a ranger? I said, snapping the cylinder closed. Fire kills everything. I pulled out my emergency flare and struck it. Red light filled the tunnel, and both creatures hissed and stepped backward, including things that shouldn't burn. I threw the flare at a pile of old mining equipment covered in oil and rust. It caught fire immediately, flames racing along the tunnel walls where decades of coal dust had settled. The Wendigo screamed, a sound like metal tearing, and ran for the entrance. But I was already ahead of them, another flare in my hand. Elena, wait, Tom called, his voice human again. We can make a deal. We can. I threw the second flare at the mine's support timbers. The explosion knocked me flat. Rock and debris rained down as the old mine collapsed, sealing the Wendigo inside with tons of stone and earth. I crawled toward the entrance as the tunnel filled with smoke and dust. My ears were ringing, and blood was running down my face from a cut on my forehead. Outside, I found Linda and Amy huddled together in the snow. They were both crying, holding each other tight. Are they dead? Amy asked. I looked back at the collapsed mine entrance. Nothing could survive under that much rock. Yeah, they're dead. But even as I said it, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd only won this round. That somewhere in these mountains, there might be others, hungry ones, waiting for their next meal. The rescue helicopter found us 3 hours later. Linda and Amy were taken to the hospital in Anchorage, and I spent 2 days answering questions from state police investigators. I told them the truth. Mostly. A family of 4 went missing, 3 were found dead in a mine collapse, 1 daughter died of exposure. The investigators didn't ask too many questions about the details. Mine accidents weren't uncommon in Alaska. What I didn't tell them was about the Wendigo. Who would believe me? Jake Morrison's body was found in my cabin, officially listed as the victim of a bear attack. The investigators figured a grizzly had broken in looking for food and caught Jake by surprise. It was easier than explaining claw marks that came from something with human-shaped hands. Linda Morrison recovered from her ordeal, but Amy didn't. The girl spent 3 weeks in psychiatric care, talking about monsters that wore human faces and fed on souls. Eventually, the doctors diagnosed her with trauma-induced psychosis and put her on medication. But I knew better. I went back to the collapsed mine a week later, alone. The entrance was completely sealed, tons of rock and earth blocking the tunnel. Nothing could dig its way out of there. But standing in the snow, looking at the burial site, I found fresh tracks. Not human tracks. Something with feet that were too long and toes that ended in claws. The tracks led away from the mine, deeper into the forest. I followed them for half a mile before I lost the trail in a creek bed. But I'd seen enough. Either I hadn't killed all of them, or there were others. Maybe there had always been others. That night, I sat in my cabin with my gun cleaned and loaded on the table beside me. I tried calling my ex-wife Susan just to hear a familiar voice. "Hello, Elena," she said when she picked up. "How nice to hear from you." "Susan, I stopped. Something was wrong with her voice. It was Susan, but not quite right. Too friendly. Too interested in talking to me. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "You sound worried." "When did we get married?" I asked quickly. A pause. "Elena, what kind of question is that? Just answer me. We got married in." Another pause, longer this time. "Why would you ask me that?" I hung up the phone and stared at it for a long time. Maybe it was paranoia. Maybe Susan was just confused by my strange question. Or maybe the Wendigo had learned from our encounter. Maybe they'd realized that attacking isolated campers in the wilderness was too risky. Maybe they'd decided to try a different hunting ground. Like the city where my ex-wife lived. I tried calling Susan back, but the line was busy. I tried again every hour for the rest of the night. It was always busy. The next morning, I put in for an early retirement. The Park Service approved it without question. After the bear attack that killed Jake, nobody blamed me for wanting out. But I didn't leave Alaska. I couldn't, because now I knew they were out there. The hungry ones, the never satisfied. And somebody had to watch for them. 6 months later, a family of 5 disappeared while camping in Denali National Park. 3 weeks after that, 2 hikers vanished near Fairbanks. The official reports blamed exposure, wildlife attacks, equipment failure. I knew better. I bought a truck with 4-wheel drive and filled the back with emergency supplies, silver bullets, flares, gasoline, anything that might hurt something that shouldn't exist. I started following the reports, investigating the disappearances that didn't make sense. Sometimes I was too late. I'd find empty campsites and abandoned cars, drag marks leading into the wilderness. But sometimes I was just in time. The first time I saved someone, a young couple whose car had broken down on a lonely mountain road, I felt like I'd found my real purpose. For 23 years, I'd protected people from bears and avalanches and getting lost in the woods. Now I was protecting them from something much worse. The Wendigo are still out there. I know because I've seen them. They're learning, adapting, spreading, getting smarter with every person they consume. But I'm learning too. And as long as I'm alive, as long as I can pull a trigger and strike a flare, I'll keep hunting them. Because someone has to. Someone has to guard the places where civilization ends and the hungry darkness begins. My name is Elena Rodriguez. I used to be a forest ranger. Now I'm something else. Entirely. And I'm never going to stop. My name is William Cross, and I've been a forest ranger for 15 years. Most people think that's a long time to spend watching trees and chasing hikers who don't follow the rules. They're probably right. But the pay is steady, and my wife Sarah has been sick for 3 years now. Cancer doesn't care if you're a good person or if you love your family more than anything in the world. It just takes and takes until there's nothing left. That's how I ended up taking money from people I should have been arresting. The Tongass National Forest in southeast Alaska is bigger than most states. Ancient trees stretch up so high you can't see their tops, and the rain falls so often that moss grows on everything. It's beautiful in a way that makes you feel small. When I first started working here, I thought I was protecting something sacred. Now I just try to get through each day without thinking too much about what I've become. The poachers first approached me 6 months ago. A guy named Danny Marsh, who ran hunting trips for rich people from the lower 48, he offered me $500 to look the other way when his clients shot a few wolves out of season. Said the wolves were killing too many deer anyway, so really I'd be helping the forest. I said no the first time. The second time too, but Sarah's medical bills kept coming, and our insurance kept finding new ways to deny coverage. When Danny offered me $2,000, I stopped saying no. After that, it got easier. 100 here to ignore some illegal traps, 500 there to forget about seeing certain vehicles in protected areas. Last month, I made more money from bribes than from my actual job. The guilt was eating me alive, but at least Sarah could get her treatments. This morning started like any other. I was checking the northern perimeter when my radio crackled to life. Danny's voice came through clear as day, even though he was supposed to be 50 miles away. "Cross, you there? Got a big group coming in tonight. They want to take down a whole pack of wolves. We're talking 10 grand for you to take a long lunch break." $10,000. More than I made in 3 months of honest work. Enough to cover Sarah's next surgery and maybe get ahead on some bills. "Where?" I asked. "Cedar Creek Valley. You know the place." I knew it. The valley was home to the largest wolf pack in this part of the forest. 15 or 20 animals that had been living there for generations. The pack was protected under federal law, but laws don't mean much when nobody's watching. "When?" I said into the radio. "Sunset. Just make sure you're nowhere near there between 6 and 8 tonight." I looked at my watch. It was already 3 in the afternoon. In a few hours, those wolves would be dead, and I'd have enough money to keep my wife alive a little longer. "Understood," I said. That was my last radio transmission as an honest man. The thing about guilt is that it changes how everything looks. As I drove toward Cedar Creek to remove the trail cameras that might record what was about to happen, the forest seemed different. Darker. The usual sounds of birds and small animals had stopped. Even the wind through the trees felt wrong, like the whole place was holding its breath. I told myself it was just my imagination. Guilt can make you paranoid, make you see things that aren't there. But as I pulled up to the first camera location, I realized the forest really was silent. Completely silent. In 15 years of working these woods, I'd never heard anything like it. The temperature had dropped too. It had been 60 degrees when I left the ranger station. Now my breath was making little clouds in the air. The thermometer in my truck read 32 degrees. I grabbed my tools and walked over to the camera, mounted on a tall pine tree. As I reached up to disconnect it, something made me stop. There was a smell in the air, not the usual forest smells of pine and earth and growing things. This was different, older, like wet fur and something rotting. And then I saw the tracks. They started right next to my truck and led off into the trees. Wolf tracks, but bigger than any wolf I'd ever seen. The prints were as long as my hand and pressed deep into the soft ground, like whatever made them weighed twice as much as it should. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was that the tracks walked upright, like a man's. I knelt down and looked at the tracks more carefully. Each print showed 4 toes with claw marks, definitely from some kind of canine. But the spacing between them was all wrong for a wolf running on 4 legs. These prints were made by something walking on 2 feet. My hands started shaking as I took pictures with my camera. In 15 years as a ranger, I'd seen bear tracks, mountain lion tracks, and every kind of wolf track you could imagine. I'd never seen anything like this. The tracks led straight into the trees, heading in the direction of Cedar Creek Valley, toward the exact spot where Danny and his clients would be hunting tonight. I should have called it in right then. Should have radioed for backup and told them about tracks from an unknown animal in the protected area. But I couldn't. How would I explain what I was doing out here? How would I justify being anywhere near the hunting site? Instead, I followed the tracks. The trail was easy to follow because whatever made them didn't seem to care about hiding. The prints went straight through the forest, right over fallen logs, and through thick brush that would have forced a normal animal to go around. In some places, the tracks went up the sides of trees, as if the creature had climbed straight up the bark before jumping down and continuing on. After about 10 minutes of following the trail, I found the first sign. It was carved into the trunk of a massive cedar tree, cut deep into the bark with something very sharp. The words were in perfect English, written in what looked like formal legal language. William Cross, Ranger 2847. You are hereby summoned to appear before the Pack Council for crimes against the natural order. Failure to appear will result in immediate judgment. Charges: accepting bribes to ignore poaching, conspiracy to destroy protected wildlife, violation of sacred trust. Trial date: today at Sunset Location, Cedar Creek Valley. Dress code: come as you are. You will not be returning. I read it 3 times before the words really sank in. Someone knew about the bribes. Someone knew about tonight's hunt, but how was that possible? Danny and I were the only ones who knew, and we'd been careful to keep everything off the radio. And who would carve a formal legal summons into a tree? Environmental activists, maybe, but this didn't feel like their style. This felt like something else entirely. My first thought was to call the whole thing off, radio Danny and tell him the hunt was canceled, that it wasn't safe. But $10,000 was a lot of money. More money than I'd ever seen at one time, and the message in the tree had to be some kind of joke. Maybe Danny was testing me, seeing if I'd get scared and back out. I decided to head to Cedar Creek and see for myself what was going on. The valley was about 2 miles from where I found the carved message. As I got closer, the silence got worse. No bird songs, no rustling in the brush, no sound of wind through the trees, just my footsteps on the forest floor and the sound of my own breathing. The sun was getting low in the sky by the time I reached the edge of the valley. I checked my watch. 5:30. Danny and his clients would be here soon. I climbed up on a fallen log to get a better view of the area and immediately saw that something was very wrong. The wolves were already there. Not just a few wolves, the entire pack. They were arranged in a perfect circle in the center of the valley, sitting completely still like they were waiting for something. In the middle of the circle was a flat area that looked like it had been cleared of brush and debris. It reminded me of a courtroom, with the wolves sitting like a jury. But these weren't normal wolves. Even from a distance, I could see that they were too big, too organized, and some of them appeared to be wearing clothes. I pulled out my binoculars for a closer look and almost dropped them in shock. The largest wolf, sitting at what would be the judge's position, was wearing a black robe. Its front paws held what looked like a wooden gavel. The other wolves around the circle wore smaller pieces of clothing, necklaces, hats, pieces of jewelry that glinted in the late afternoon sun. Human jewelry. Jewelry that I recognized. The necklace on the wolf to the left belonged to Ranger Tom Hayes, who disappeared 3 months ago. The watch on another wolf head belonged to Ranger Maria Santos, who'd vanished last winter. Danny had bribed both of them before he'd approached me. As I watched through the binoculars, the wolf in the judge's robe stood up on its hind legs. It was at least 8 feet tall, bigger than any wolf had a right to be. It looked directly at me, even though I was hidden in the trees over 100 yards away, and pointed one massive paw in my direction. Then it spoke. The voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together, but the words were perfectly clear. William Cross, you have been summoned. Approach the court. Every instinct I had told me to run, to get back to my truck and drive away as fast as possible. But my legs wouldn't move. It was like the voice had frozen me in place. The wolf spoke again, louder this time. William Cross. Final warning, approach the court or judgment will be passed in your absence. Somehow, I found the strength to move. I climbed down from the log and started walking toward the circle of wolves, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my binoculars. As I got closer, I could see that these creatures weren't really wolves at all. They had the basic shape of wolves, but their eyes were too intelligent, too human. Their front paws had long fingers that could grip and manipulate objects. And when they opened their mouths, I could see that their teeth were arranged more like a human's than a wolf's. They were something in between. Something that shouldn't exist. I stopped about 20 feet from the circle. The judge creature gestured for me to come closer. William Cross, it said in that grinding voice. You stand accused of crimes against the natural order. How do you plead? I stood there, staring at the creature in the black robe, trying to make sense of what was happening. This had to be some kind of hallucination. Maybe I'd hit my head when I was following the tracks. Maybe the stress of the last few months had finally broken something in my brain. But the cold air on my skin felt real. The smell of wet fur and old earth was real. and the intelligence in the creature's eyes was definitely real. "How do I plead to what?" I managed to say. The judge creature opened what looked like a leather-bound book and began reading in that terrible grinding voice. "William Cross, Ranger number 2847, you are charged with the following crimes. First, accepting bribes to ignore the illegal killing of protected wildlife. Second, conspiring to destroy an entire wolf pack for financial gain. Third, violating the sacred trust between humankind and the natural world." As it read, other creatures around the circle began to growl softly. The sound was low and continuous, like distant thunder that never stopped. "These are serious charges, William Cross. The penalty for each is death. Do you understand?" "This isn't real," I said. "You're not real. Wolves don't talk. They don't hold trials. The wolves talk." Judge creature tilted its massive head. "You have worked in these forests for 15 years. In all that time, have you never wondered why some rangers disappear without a trace? Why some poachers are found dead, with no signs of human violence? Why certain areas of the forest feel wrong to humans?" I had wondered about those things. Every ranger who worked remote areas had stories about colleagues who'd vanished, about hunters found torn apart by something that left tracks unlike any known animal, about places in the deep woods where even experienced outdoorsmen refused to go. "We are the balance," the creature continued. "We are the consequence. For thousands of years, we have watched and judged. When humans respect the natural order, we remain hidden. When they violate the sacred laws, we act." "But I'm just trying to save my wife," I said. "She's sick. She needs money for treatment." The creature's expression didn't change. Thomas Hayes said he needed money for his daughter's education. Maria Santos said she needed money to pay off gambling debts. They all had reasons, William Cross. Good reasons. Human reasons. What happened to them? In response, the judge creature gestured to the wolves wearing human jewelry. "They are still here. They serve the pack now, in a different form." The horror of what it was saying hit me like a physical blow. The other rangers hadn't disappeared. They'd been transformed, turned into these creatures as punishment for their crimes. "The court recognizes that you have suffered," the judge said. "Your mate is ill. This causes you pain, and pain makes even good humans do terrible things. But suffering does not excuse the breaking of sacred laws." "What sacred laws?" I shouted. "I never agreed to any sacred laws." For the first time, the creature's expression changed. Its lips pulled back to show rows of sharp teeth. "Ignorance is not an excuse. When you took the oath to protect these forests, you entered into an ancient compact. You swore to guard the balance between civilization and wilderness. You promised to put the sacred trust above your own needs. That's just words in a ceremony. Nobody told me about talking wolves." "The pack will now hear evidence of your crimes," the judge announced, ignoring my protests. One by one, the other creatures around the circle stood and began presenting evidence. They had photographs of me meeting with Danny Marsh, recordings of our radio conversations that should have been impossible to make. They even had copies of the bank deposits, showing exactly how much money I'd taken and when. But the most damning evidence came when the judge called its first witness. A ghostly image appeared in the center of the circle. It was a wolf, but translucent, like smoke given shape. When it spoke, its voice was filled with pain and sadness. "I was the alpha female of the Cedar Creek pack," the spirit said. "Last month, humans with guns killed my mate and 3 of my children while they slept. This human," it pointed at me with one ethereal paw, "was paid to be elsewhere when it happened." More spirits appeared. A young wolf that had been caught in an illegal trap. An old male that had been shot just for sport. Cubs that had starved when their parents were killed. All of them testified about how my corruption had led to their deaths. With each testimony, the growling from the pack grew louder. By the time the last spirit faded away, the sound was like standing next to a freight train. "William Cross," the judge said, "you have heard the evidence. You have heard the testimony. Do you have anything to say in your defense?" I thought about Sarah lying in her hospital bed, getting weaker every day. I thought about the stack of medical bills on my kitchen table. I thought about how scared she looked when the doctors told us about the surgery she needed. "I did it for love," I said. "Everything I did, for love. Love is not a defense against the breaking of sacred laws, the judge replied. Love is what makes the breaking more tragic, not less criminal. The pack began to deliberate. They didn't speak out loud, but I could tell they were communicating somehow. Their eyes would glow for a moment, like light passing between them. It took less than a minute. William Cross, the judge announced, the pack finds you guilty on all charges. The sentence is death. I felt my knees buckle. Please, my wife needs me. She'll die without the money for her surgery. Your wife's fate was sealed the moment you chose to break the sacred trust. However, the pack recognizes your service to the forest before your corruption began. Therefore, we offer you a choice. What kind of choice? You may die now, quickly and with honor, or you may accept the hunt. What's the hunt? The judge creature's teeth gleamed in the fading sunlight. You will be given a 24-hour head start. If you can evade the pack for one full day and one full night, your crimes will be forgiven and your wife will be saved. If we catch you before then, your death will be slow and without mercy. Around the circle, the other creatures began to howl. It was a sound that raised every hair on my body and made my bones ache. Choose now, the judge said. Death or the hunt. I looked around the circle of glowing eyes and savage faces. 24 hours seemed impossible, but it was better than no chance at all. The hunt, I said. Then run, William Cross. The sun sets in 1 hour. When full darkness falls, the pack will come for you. I ran harder than I'd ever run in my life, through thick brush that tore at my clothes and over fallen logs that tried to trip me with every step. Behind me, I could hear the pack howling, but they weren't chasing me yet. The rules of the hunt said I had until full darkness, and the creatures seemed to follow their rules. Absolutely. But I knew that once night fell, I was dead. These things weren't normal wolves. They could track perfectly, move through dimensions, and communicate with their minds. How do you hide from something that can phase through solid matter? How do you outrun something that knows exactly where you are at all times? I needed help, and I knew exactly where to get it. My truck was still parked near the first trail camera. If I could reach it before dark, I could drive to the ranger station and call for backup. Maybe the pack only operated in the deep forest. Maybe if I got to civilization, their power would be broken. It was a thin hope, but it was all I had. The sun was already touching the horizon when I saw my truck through the trees. I sprinted the last 100 yards and threw myself behind the wheel, gasping for breath. My hands shook as I tried to start the engine. Nothing. The truck was completely dead. I popped the hood and looked inside. All the wires had been chewed through by something with very sharp teeth. The battery was missing entirely. Even if I'd had tools and spare parts, there was no way to fix this much damage. The howling started again, closer this time. The sun had disappeared behind the mountains, and the last light was fading fast from the sky. In the growing darkness, I could see pairs of glowing eyes moving through the trees. The hunt had begun. I grabbed my emergency pack from the truck and started running again. The pack gave me a few minutes head start, probably to make the hunt more interesting. But soon, I could hear them crashing through the brush behind me. They were playing with me. I could tell by the way they stayed just close enough for me to hear but never quite caught up. Every time I thought I'd found a good hiding place, they'd let out a howl that told me they knew exactly where I was. For hours, I ran through the dark forest, guided only by moonlight and the occasional flash of glowing eyes. My lungs burned, my legs cramped, and my clothes were torn to pieces by thorns and branches. But somehow, I kept moving. Dawn came slowly, painting the forest in shades of gray and gold. I'd been running for almost 10 hours, and I was still alive, only 14 more hours to go. That's when I saw him. Danny Marsh was sitting on a fallen log next to a small stream, looking perfectly calm and relaxed. His hunting rifle was leaning against the log beside him. "Danny," I gasped, stumbling toward him. "Thank God, we have to get out of here. There are things in the forest, dangerous things." He looked up at me with a strange smile. "I know, William. I've been waiting for you." "Waiting for me? How did you know I'd come this way?" "Because I told them you would." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean, you told them?" Danny picked up his rifle and stood up slowly. "I mean, I've been working with the pack for 3 years, William. Ever since they caught me poaching and gave me the same choice they gave you." "You're one of them?" Not exactly. They let me keep my human form because I'm useful to them. I find corrupt rangers and set them up for judgment. In exchange, they let me live and give me a small territory to hunt in legally. I stared at him in disbelief. You set me up. All those bribes, all those jobs. You were leading me to this. The pack needed to test you, to see how far your corruption would go. Personally, I thought you'd stop after the first few small bribes. You always seemed like a decent guy. But when you agreed to let us slaughter an entire pack for $10,000, he shook his head sadly. That's when they decided you had to face judgment. But my wife. Your wife will be fine, Danny interrupted. The pack isn't cruel, William. They've already arranged for her medical bills to be paid anonymously. A wealthy environmental group is going to cover all her treatments. Then why the hunt? Why make me run all night if they were going to help her anyway? Danny's expression grew serious. Because you still have to face justice for what you've done. The deaths you caused can't be undone. But the pack believes in redemption, not just punishment. If you can prove your worth in the hunt, they'll offer you the same deal they offered me. What deal? Join them. Become a guardian of the forest instead of its betrayer. Help them find and judge other corrupt officials. Live with the guilt of what you've done, but use that guilt to make sure it never happens again. Behind me, I could hear the pack approaching. Their footsteps were slow and deliberate now, no longer the frantic chase of the night before. They knew I had nowhere left to run. What if I refuse? I asked. Then you die here, and your wife never learns what really happened to you. The pack emerged from the trees in a perfect line, with the judge creature in the center. They looked different in the daylight, somehow more real and more terrifying. The judge still wore its black robe, but now I could see that the fabric was woven from human hair. The jewelry the others wore glinted with fresh blood. William Cross, the judge said in its grinding voice, you have survived the hunt. Do you accept transformation? I looked at Danny, then at the pack of creatures that had once been human. They were monsters, but they were monsters with a purpose. They protected the forest from people like me, people like I used to be. If I say yes, what happens to me? You will become our agent in the human world. You will help us identify those who break the sacred laws. You will live with the knowledge of what you have done, and you will spend the rest of your life trying to balance the scales. And if I say no, you die, and we find another way to do what must be done. I thought about Sarah, recovering in a hospital bed she could finally afford. I thought about the wolves I'd helped kill, and the cubs that had starved because of my greed. I thought about Tom Hayes and Maria Santos and all the other rangers who'd made the same choice I was facing now. I accept, I said. The transformation didn't hurt as much as I'd expected. The change happened slowly over several weeks. First, my senses became sharper. I could hear conversations from miles away and smell fear on people from across a room. Then my body began to change, becoming stronger and faster than any human had a right to be. But the biggest change was in my mind. I could feel the pack's presence constantly, like voices whispering at the edge of my consciousness. They shared their knowledge with me, showing me things about the forest that no human was supposed to know. I learned that there were dozens of guardians like me scattered across North America. Former park rangers, forest service workers, and wildlife officers who'd been corrupted and then redeemed. We formed a network that watched for violations of what the pack called the sacred laws. My new job was simple. Find corrupt officials and set them up for judgment, just like Danny had done to me. 6 months after my transformation, I identified a park ranger in Montana who was taking bribes to allow illegal mining operations. 3 months after that, it was a wildlife officer in Colorado who was helping wealthy hunters kill protected species. Each time, I followed the same pattern. I gathered evidence, made contact, and slowly led them deeper into corruption until they crossed the line that would bring the pack's attention. Then I would guide them to a place where justice could be served. Some chose death over transformation. Others, like me, chose to join the Guardians. A few proved that their corruption came from desperation rather than greed, and the pack allowed them to live with a warning, but none of them were allowed to return to their old lives unchanged. Sarah recovered completely. The anonymous donation covered not just her surgery, but all of her follow-up care. She never learned where the money came from, and I never told her what I'd become. As far as she knows, I still work as a regular forest ranger, just in a different location. She doesn't know that I no longer age at the same rate as humans. She doesn't know that I can speak to animals or see in complete darkness. She doesn't know that twice a month, I attend trials where creatures that were once human decide the fate of people who've broken laws that don't exist in any legal code. She doesn't know that the man she married died in a forest clearing and was replaced by something that remembers being human. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice. The guilt never goes away, and the knowledge of what I've become weighs on me every day. But then I think about the forest and the animals that are still alive because corrupt officials no longer protect the people who would destroy them. Last week, I received a new assignment. There's a forest ranger in Oregon who's been taking money to ignore illegal logging operations. His wife is sick, and he's desperate for money to pay for her treatment. His name is Robert Chen, and his story sounds very familiar. I've already made contact. I've already started the process that will lead him to face the pack's judgment. In a few months, he'll have to make the same choice I made: death or transformation. I'm hoping he chooses transformation. The pack can always use more guardians, and the forests need protection now more than ever. But if he chooses death, I'll respect that decision too. Some people can't live with what they've done, even if redemption is possible. As for me, I've learned to live with the knowledge that every choice has consequences, and some consequences last forever. I broke the sacred trust between humanity and nature, and I'll spend the rest of my very long life trying to repair that damage. The pack judges tell me that's the beginning of wisdom. I think they might be right. My name is Margaret Sullivan, and I'm a park ranger at Wrangell Street Elias National Park in Alaska. I've been doing this job for 6 years now, protecting old buildings and learning about the people who lived here long ago. It's good work, quiet work, the kind that lets you think, but right now, I wish I couldn't think at all. I'm standing in front of my childhood home for the first time in 15 years. Dad died 3 weeks ago, and his lawyer called to say I inherited everything. The old log house looks exactly the same: red metal roof, green shutters, the porch swing Dad built when I was 7. Even the firewood is stacked the same way. That's what bothers me. Everything should be falling apart. Dad had dementia for the last 5 years. He couldn't take care of himself, let alone this place. But the grass is cut, the windows are clean, there's even smoke coming from the chimney. I walk up the front steps, and they don't creak like they used to. My key still fits the lock, but when I turn it, I realize the door wasn't even locked. That's not like Dad at all. He locked everything, even when we lived in the middle of nowhere. Inside, it smells like home, coffee and wood smoke, and Mom's lavender soap. But Mom died when I was 16. The smell shouldn't still be here. I set my bag down in the living room. Everything is clean and tidy. Dad's reading chair has a book open on the arm, one of his old hunting magazines. There's a coffee cup on the table next to it, still warm. My hands start shaking. I tell myself it's just the cold. Alaska in September gets chilly, even during the day. But I know that's not it. Something feels wrong here. Not dangerous wrong, just off. Like when you hear your name called, but nobody's there. I walk into the kitchen, and that's when I see it. On the counter, next to Dad's old coffee maker, there's a plate with a half-eaten sandwich. The bread isn't stale, the edges aren't hard. Someone was eating this today. But Dad's been dead for 3 weeks. I pick up the sandwich and sniff it. Fresh turkey, mayo, lettuce. The kind Dad made every day for lunch. My stomach turns, and I drop it back on the plate. There has to be an explanation. Maybe one of the neighbors has been checking on the place. The Hendersons live about 5 miles down the road. They've known Dad forever. It makes sense they'd want to keep the house from falling apart. I pull out my cell phone to call them, but there's no signal. There never was. This far out. Dad had a landline, though. I find it in the kitchen, pick up the receiver, and listen to the dial tone. At least that still works. Before I can dial, I hear something upstairs. Footsteps, slow and heavy. They start at the far end of the hallway and walk toward the stairs, just like Dad used to do when he was getting ready for bed. I freeze, phone still in my hand. The footsteps stop right above me. Hello? I call out. Is someone there? Nothing. I grab a kitchen knife from the counter and head upstairs. Each step creaks under my weight, just like when I was a kid trying to sneak out. The hallway is dark, but I can see all the doors are closed. I check each room, Dad's bedroom, my old room, the spare room where my brother Danny used to sleep. Empty. All of them. But in Dad's room, the bed is unmade. There's a dent in the pillow where someone's head was resting. The sheets are still warm. I back out of the room fast and almost trip down the stairs. This is crazy. I'm a park ranger. I deal with weird stuff all the time. Bears getting into cabins, hikers who swear they saw Bigfoot, tourists who think every shadow is a ghost. I know the difference between real danger and imagination. This feels real. I go back to the kitchen and find Dad's address book. My fingers are still shaking as I flip through it, looking for the Hendersons' number. When I find it, I dial quickly. Hello? Mrs. Henderson's voice sounds tired. Hi, Mrs. Henderson. This is Margaret Sullivan. I'm sorry to bother you. Margaret? Oh, honey, I'm so sorry about your father. We wanted to come to the service, but Bill's back has been acting up, and the drive to Anchorage is just too much for us now. That's okay. I was wondering, have you or Bill been checking on Dad's house since he passed? There's a long pause. No, dear. We haven't been over there in months. Last time we saw, your father was Christmas, and he didn't know who we were. It was very sad. My mouth goes dry. So nobody's been taking care of the place? Not that I know of. Why? Is everything all right? I look around the clean kitchen, at the warm coffee cup, at the sandwich someone was eating today. Yeah, I lie. Everything's fine. I was just curious. After I hang up, I sit in Dad's chair and try to think. Maybe Dad hired someone before he died. Maybe there's a caretaker I don't know about. That has to be it. I find his desk in the corner of the living room and start going through papers, bills, bank statements, medical records. And then, buried under a pile of unpaid notices, I find a stack of envelopes with my name on them. My address in Seattle. The return address is here, Dad's house. The postmarks go back 5 years. Some are from right before he died. I tear open the most recent one. Dad's handwriting is shaky, but I can still read it. Asterisk, Dear Margaret. Asterisk. Asterisk, I know you're busy with your life, but I miss you. The doctors say my mind is going, but I remember you. I remember how smart you are, how brave. I wish you would come home. I'm scared to be alone. Asterisk, asterisk. Love, Dad times, tears burn my eyes. I open another letter. Asterisk. Dear Margaret. Asterisk. Asterisk. I had an accident yesterday. Fell down the stairs. I'm okay, but it made me think. What if something happens and you never know how proud I am of you? You were right to leave this place. I should have told you that before. Asterisk, asterisk. Love, Dad times. And another. Dear Margaret, I sent you 10 letters, but you never write back. Maybe the mail isn't working, or maybe you hate me. I wouldn't blame you. I wasn't a good father after your mother died. I know that now. Love. Dad, I never got any of these letters. Not one. I'm crying now, holding these pieces of paper that showed Dad loved me, missed me, wanted me to come home. All this time, I thought he was angry that I left. I thought he blamed me for not staying to help with the family business, for going to college instead of marrying some local boy and giving him grandchildren. But he wasn't angry, he was lonely, and I never knew because I never got his letters. That's when I hear Mom's voice from the kitchen. Maggie, is that you, sweetheart? Dinner's almost ready. I drop Dad's letters and wipe my eyes. That voice, it sounds exactly like Mom. But Mom died 17 years ago. I was 16, Danny was 14. She had cancer, and it happened fast. One day, she was fine. The next day she was in the hospital, and 3 weeks later, she was gone. Maggie? The voice calls again. Don't be shy, honey, come see what I made for you. I get up slowly and walk toward the kitchen. My legs feel like rubber. This has to be stress. I've been working too hard, sleeping too little. Now Dad's death and being back in this house is making me hear things. But when I step into the kitchen, there she is. Mom stands at the stove with her back to me, stirring something in a big pot. She's wearing her favorite dress, the blue one with little white flowers that she used to wear on Sundays. Her hair is the same brown color, pulled back in the bun she always wore when she cooked. "There you are," she says without turning around. "I was worried you got lost. You've been gone so long." My mouth opens, but no words come out. This isn't possible. Mom is dead. I went to her funeral. I threw dirt on her coffin, but she looks so real, so solid. "Sit down, sweetheart. You look tired." She turns around, and I see her face. It's Mom, but something's wrong. Her eyes are too dark, like black holes in her face. Her smile is too wide, showing too many teeth. And her skin, it's pale gray, like old meat. "I made your favorite," she says. "Beef stew with those big chunks of carrots you like." I can't move, can't breathe. This thing that looks like my mother walks toward me, still smiling that horrible smile. "You're so thin, Maggie. Haven't you been eating? I worry about you all the way up there in Seattle, eating restaurant food and frozen dinners. That's not how I raised you." You're dead," I whisper. Her face changes for just a second. The smile slips, and I see something else underneath, something hungry and cold. But then the smile comes back. "Dead? What a silly thing to say. I'm right here. I've been waiting for you to come home." She reaches out to touch my cheek, and her fingers are ice cold. We all have. That's when I hear the front door open. "Hey, Maggie, you here?" It's Danny's voice. My brother Danny, who killed himself when he was 19 because he couldn't handle Mom being gone and Dad turning into a bitter, angry drunk. Danny walks into the kitchen like nothing's wrong. He looks exactly the same as the day he died, tall and skinny, wearing his old Carhartt jacket and work boots. But his eyes are the same as Mom's, black and empty. "Man, it's good to see you," he says, pulling me into a hug. His body feels wrong, too cold, too stiff, like hugging a corpse. "I missed you so much." I try to pull away, but he holds on tight. "Danny, this isn't real. You're not real." "What are you talking about?" He steps back and grins at me. "I'm as real as you are. We're all real." "All?" That's when Dad walks in. He looks like he did before the dementia took him, strong and alert, wearing his favorite flannel shirt. But those same black eyes, that same wrong smile. "There's my girl," he says. "My little ranger? I'm so proud of you, Maggie. You came home, I back against the wall. This is impossible. All three of them are dead. I know they're dead. But they're standing right here, talking to me, acting like nothing happened." "I don't understand," I say. "This isn't real. You can't be here." "But we are here," Mom says. "We've been waiting for you. We have so much to talk about." "Like why you left us," Danny adds. His smile doesn't reach his eyes. "Like why you never came back," Dad says. "Like why you never answered my letters." Mom finishes. They start moving closer, and I realize I'm trapped in the corner. 3 dead faces staring at me with those empty black eyes. "We know why," Danny says. "You were ashamed of us." "Ashamed of where you came from," Dad says. "Ashamed of your poor, stupid family," Mom says. "That's not true," I shout. "I left because I had to, because this place was killing me." Their faces change then. The false smiles disappear, and I see what they really are underneath. The skin is gray and rotting, their teeth are yellow and sharp. Their fingernails are long and black. "You left because you're selfish," Danny hisses. "You left because you thought you were better than us," Dad growls. "You left because you never loved us," Mom whispers. And maybe they're right. Maybe I am selfish. Maybe I should have stayed. Maybe if I'd been here, things would have been different. Maybe Danny wouldn't have killed himself. Maybe Dad wouldn't have drunk himself into dementia. Maybe Mom wouldn't have gotten sick. The guilt hits me like a physical blow. All these years, I told myself I left for good reasons. But what if I was just running away? What if I abandoned my family when they needed me most? "We forgive you," Mom says, reaching for me again. "We understand, but you have to stay now. You have to make it up to us." "Stay forever," Danny adds. "Never leave again," Dad finishes. Their hands are on me now, cold and wet and wrong. I can smell them, the sweet, sick smell of rotting meat. This isn't my family. Whatever these things are, they're not the people I loved. I break free and run for the back door. Behind me, I hear them calling my name, their voices getting deeper and more inhuman with each word. Maggie, don't run from us again. We love you. Come back. I burst through the door and keep running into the woods. The sun is setting, and the trees cast long shadows across the ground. I don't stop until I can't hear their voices anymore. When I finally catch my breath, I pull out my cell phone. Still no signal, but I try anyway. I need help. I need someone to tell me I'm not going crazy. But deep down, I know this isn't about phone calls or getting help. This is about something much worse. This is about coming home. I spend the night in my truck, parked on the main road. About a mile from the house, every few hours, I see lights moving around inside. Shadows passing by the windows, shapes that don't look quite human. I try to tell myself it's just my imagination. But I know better. Those things in the house aren't my family. They're something else, wearing my family's faces. When morning comes, I drive into Glen Allen to use the phone at the gas station. I call my supervisor at the Park Service and tell him I need a few more days to handle Dad's estate. He's understanding. He lost his own father last year. I also call Dr. Patricia Webb, a psychologist who works with the Park Service. Sometimes rangers see things in the wilderness that mess with their heads. Bears that look like people, voices in the wind, shadows that move wrong. Pat helps us sort out what's real and what isn't. Margaret, good to hear from you, Pat says. How are you holding up? I tell her about the house, about seeing my dead family. I try to make it sound like I know it's not real, like I'm just dealing with grief and stress. But Pat's smart. She hears what I'm not saying. Grief can play tricks on us, she says carefully, especially when there's unresolved guilt or trauma. Are you someplace safe? I think so. Good. I want you to listen to me very carefully. What you're experiencing isn't uncommon after losing a parent, especially when there were complicated feelings involved. But if these hallucinations feel real to you, if they're telling you things that make you feel guilty or ashamed, you need to remember something important. What? They're not your family. Your real family loved you enough to want you to be happy, even if that meant leaving home. Whatever these voices are telling you, they're not coming from love. They're coming from something else. After I hang up, I sit in my truck and think about what Pat said. She's right about one thing. The voices aren't coming from love. There's something hungry in those. Black eyes, something that feeds on pain and guilt. But I can't just drive away. Not yet. I need to understand what's happening. And I need to get Dad's letters. All of them. They're proof that he loved me. That he understood why I left. I drive back to the house in the afternoon. From the outside, it looks normal again. No lights, no moving shadows. Just an old log house in the woods. I go in through the front door, calling out as I enter. Hello? Anyone here? Silence. I grab a flashlight from my truck and search the house room by room. No sign of my dead family. But everywhere I look, I find evidence that someone's been living here. Dirty dishes in the sink, clothes in the laundry basket, food in the refrigerator, real food. Fresh food. I find more of Dad's letters in his bedroom. They're scattered across the bed like someone was reading them. Some are from years ago, others from just before he died. All of them are full of love and regret and hope that I'd come home. Why didn't I get these? I never changed my address. The post office should have forwarded them. That's when I noticed something else. Every letter has been opened, but the tears are fresh, like someone just opened them today. But Dad's been dead for 3 weeks. I gather up all the letters and stuff them in my jacket. Whatever's going on here, I'm not leaving these behind. They're all I have left of my real father. As I'm heading back downstairs, I hear the front door slam. Maggie? It's Mom's voice again. Where are you, sweetheart? I freeze on the stairs. She's back. They're all back. We were worried about you, Danny calls out. You shouldn't have run off like that. We just want to talk, Dad adds. I can hear them moving around downstairs, searching for me. Their footsteps sound wrong, too heavy, like they're dragging something. I sneak up to the second floor and hide in my old bedroom. Through the crack under the door, I can see shadows moving in the hallway. They know I'm up here. Maggie, Mom's voice is right outside my door now. We know you're scared. We know you feel guilty about leaving us. But we can help you with that. We can take all that guilt away, Danny says. All that shame, Dad says. All you have to do is let us in. The doorknob starts to turn. I didn't lock it. There's no lock on this door. Dad removed it when I was 12 because he said I spent too much time alone. The door opens slowly, and they step inside. But they don't look like my family anymore. They're tall and thin and gray, with 2 long arms and fingers that end in claws. Their faces are still recognizable, but stretched and wrong, like someone tried to make human masks out of old leather. There you are, the thing that looks like Mom says. Her voice sounds like wind through dead leaves. We've been looking everywhere for you. You can't keep running from us, the dad thing says. We're your family. We love you. We love you so much, the Danny thing says. We want to be close to you. Closer than we ever were when we were alive. They move toward me, and I can see what they really are. Not ghosts, not spirits. Something else? Something that feeds on human emotion, on guilt and pain and regret. You left us, Mom thing says, reaching out with those terrible claws. You abandoned us when we needed you most. Danny killed himself because you weren't there to stop him, Dad thing says. I died alone because you were too busy with your fancy college education, Mom thing says. Dad drank himself to death because you broke his heart, Danny thing says. Each word hits me like a physical blow, because part of me believes it, part of me has always believed it. But we forgive you, they say in unison. All you have to do is feed us. Feed you what? Your guilt, your shame, your pain. Give it all to us, and we'll take it away forever. They're close enough to touch me now. Their breath smells like grave dirt and rotten meat, but their eyes are so hungry. No, I whisper, no. You're not my family. My family is dead. The mom thing tilts her head. We are your family. We're exactly what your family became because of what you did to us. My mother died of cancer. My brother killed himself because he was depressed. My father drank because he couldn't handle losing his wife and son. None of that was my fault. Wasn't it? Dad thing asks. If you'd stayed, maybe your mother wouldn't have given up. Maybe your brother wouldn't have felt so alone. Maybe I wouldn't have needed the bottle to forget. For a moment, I almost believed them. The guilt is so strong, so familiar. I've carried it for years. The weight of leaving, the fear that I'm selfish and cold and uncaring. But then I remember Pat's words. And I remember the letters. My father wrote to me, I say, pulling out the letters. He told me I was right to leave. He told me he was proud of me. The creatures hiss and step back. The letters seem to burn their eyes. Lies, Danny thing spits. We destroyed those letters years ago, Mom thing says. Then how do I have them? They look at each other, confused and angry. For the first time, they seem uncertain. You're not my family. I say again, louder this time. You're something else, something that feeds on guilt and pain, but I'm done feeding you. I push past them and run for the stairs. Behind me, I hear them changing, their voices becoming deeper, more animal. The sounds of claws on wood, of something large moving fast. I make it to the front door and burst outside. The sun is setting again, and the forest is full of shadows. But I don't stop running until I reach my truck. As I drive away, I look back at the house. In the upstairs window, I see 3 shapes watching me go. But they're not human shapes anymore. They're something else entirely. I don't go back to the house that night. Instead, I drive to the ranger station in Copper Center and use their computer to research the property records. What I find makes my blood run cold. The Sullivan homestead has been in our family for 4 generations. But according to the records, people have been disappearing there for over 60 years. Hunters who never came home. Hikers who went missing. Even some of our own neighbors, back when I was a kid. I remember now. The Hendersons' oldest son, Michael. He disappeared when I was 10. They found his truck by our property line, but never found him. Dad said he probably fell through the ice on Miller Creek. But there was no ice in July. And Sarah Winters from down the valley, she vanished when I was 15. Her family said she was coming to visit us, but we never saw her. Dad said she must have gotten lost in the woods. How many people, how many visitors who never made it home? I dive deeper into the old newspaper archives. The earliest disappearance I can find dates back to 1962, a year after my grandfather built the house. A wildlife photographer named James Reed came to document the local bear population. His equipment was found scattered around our property, but he was never seen again. That's when I find the old journal entries. They're in a box of historical documents from the area, donated by families who moved away. One is from a woman named Elena Yazzie, whose husband worked as a hunting guide in the 1972nd. Asterisk. Joseph says there's something wrong with the Sullivan place. The animals won't go near it anymore. Even the ravens stay away, and they'll go anywhere for food. He thinks the family feeds something out there, something that shouldn't exist. Asterisk. Another entry. From 1985. Asterisk. Lost another hunter today. Third one this year, who went missing near the Sullivan homestead. The Park Service is starting to ask questions, but what can we tell them? That there are things in these woods that used to be human? That they're getting stronger every year, hungrier every year? Asterisk. And then, the one that makes my hands shake. Asterisk. Talked to old Frank Sullivan today. He's dying, and he knows it. Told me the truth about his family. Said the things in his house aren't his real family at all. Said they showed up after his wife died, wearing her face, feeding on his grief. He's been feeding them for 20 years, bringing them visitors, keeping them strong. He wants to stop, but he's too weak now, too addicted to the comfort they give him. God help him. God help us all. Asterisk. Frank Sullivan was my grandfather. He died when I was 5, but I remember him, sad and quiet, always talking to people who weren't there. Dad said it was dementia, but what if it wasn't? What if these things have been feeding on my family for generations? I print out everything I can and drive back toward the house. But this time, I'm not going alone. I stop at the Bring fire station in Glen Allen and talk to Captain Jim Torres, a man I've known since I was a kid. I need help, I tell him. Something's wrong at Dad's place. Jim's a good man, practical and steady. He doesn't ask too many questions when I tell him I'm worried about squatters or vandals. He agrees to come with me in the morning to check things out. But when morning comes, I can't find Jim anywhere. His wife says he left early to meet me at the Sullivan place. She's been trying to reach him on the radio for hours. I drive to the house alone, my heart pounding. Jim's truck is parked in the driveway, but there's no sign of him. I call out his name as I walk toward the house. No answer. Inside, I find Jim sitting at the kitchen table. He's staring at nothing, his eyes blank and empty. There's a coffee cup in front of him, but it's been there long enough to grow cold. Jim? I touch his shoulder. Jim, can you hear me? He turns his head slowly and looks at me. His eyes are the same black holes I've seen before. Hello, Margaret, he says, but it's not his voice anymore. It's deeper, older, hungrier. We've been waiting for you. I back away as Jim stands up. His movements are wrong, too stiff, like a puppet being controlled by invisible strings. You brought us a gift, he says. Fresh pain, fresh guilt. Jim Torres feels so bad about not being able to save his daughter from that car accident 10 years ago. So much delicious suffering. Let him go. We can't do that. But don't worry, we'll take good care of him. Just like we took care of your grandfather, just like we took care of all the others. That's when I see them. Shadows moving in the corners of the room. The things that look like my family, but I can see their true forms now. Tall and gray and wrong, with too many teeth and too many fingers. You've been feeding on people for decades? I say, feeding and growing stronger, the mom thing says. Every visitor who comes here with pain in their heart, guilt in their soul. Every hunter who feels bad about leaving his family. Every hiker who regrets not calling his mother. They all feed us, and you, the dad thing says, you're the best of all. So much guilt, so much shame. You've been feeding us from miles away for years, just by feeling bad about leaving home. That's why you never got the letters, the Danny thing says. We made sure of that. Guilt tastes better when it's pure, when it's not contaminated by forgiveness or love. I understand now. These things aren't just mimicking my family, they're parasites that feed on negative emotions. They've been harvesting guilt and pain from everyone who comes near this place. And I've been their favorite meal for 15 years, feeding them long distance with my self-doubt and regret. But now you're here, Jim Thing says. Now we can feed properly. They start moving toward me, all of them, their forms shifting and changing with each step. I can see their true shapes underneath the human masks, something between animal and shadow, between nightmare and reality. I run for the back door, but it's locked. The windows won't open. They've trapped me inside. There's nowhere to go, Maggie, Mom Thing says. This is your home. This is where you belong. With your family, Dad Thing says. Forever and ever, Danny Thing says. Until you die and become like us, Jim Thing says. But I'm not the scared teenager who ran away from this place anymore. I'm a park ranger. I've faced down bears and wildcats and drunken tourists with guns. I know how to handle dangerous situations, and I know something they don't know. I pull out my lighter and Dad's letters, all of them, proof of his love and forgiveness. But more than that, I pull out the gasoline I've been carrying in my truck, the gas I brought to clean Dad's old tools. You want to feed on my guilt? I ask them. Then here's something to do. Choke on. I pour gasoline around the kitchen and light the letters on fire. The creatures scream as the flames spread. Not human screams. Something much worse. The sound of hunger and rage and ancient, endless need. You can't destroy us, Mom Thing shrieks. We're your family. No, I say, backing toward the door as the fire spreads. You're not. My family loved me enough to let me go. They loved me enough to want me to be happy. The fire reaches the walls and starts climbing toward the ceiling. The creatures are changing shape now, becoming less human with each passing second. I can see what they really are. Massive, gray things with too many limbs and mouths full of needle teeth. But they're afraid of the fire. They can't get close to it. My mother died loving me, I shout over the roar of flames. My brother died because he was sick, not because of me. My father died knowing I was safe and happy somewhere else. That's the truth. That's what really... The front door finally opens, and I burst outside into the cool morning air. Behind me, the house burns. And inside, I can hear the creatures screaming as they die. But not all of them. As I run toward my truck, I see one more shape in the smoke. Jim Torres, stumbling out of the burning house. The real Jim, his eyes clear and human again. Margaret? He coughs and falls to his knees. What happened? Where am I? I help him to the truck and drive us both away from the fire. In my rearview mirror, I watch the house burn to the ground. 4 generations of my family's home, going up in smoke. But I don't feel sad about it. I feel free. The fire department calls it an electrical fault, old wiring in an old house. Jim doesn't remember anything after arriving at the property. The doctors say it's probably smoke inhalation, maybe a minor concussion from falling debris. I don't correct them. The insurance money from the house is enough to pay off Dad's medical bills and have some left over. I donate that money to a counseling center for people dealing with family trauma and guilt. It seems like the right thing to do. I stay in Alaska for another week, settling Dad's affairs and making sure Jim is okay. On my last day, I visit the cemetery where Mom, Dad, and Danny are buried. Their graves are simple and clean, with flowers that neighbors have left over the years. I sit by Dad's headstone and read his letters out loud, all of them, even the painful ones. But they're not painful anymore. They're proof that love can survive death, that forgiveness is possible, that family doesn't have to be a prison. I'm sorry I didn't come home sooner, I tell him. But you were right. Leaving was the right thing to do, and I'm okay, Dad. I'm really okay. The wind picks up, rustling the leaves on the trees around the cemetery. For just a moment, I think I hear something in that wind. A voice, warm and familiar. I know, sweetheart. I always knew. But when I listen closer, it's just wind. I drive back to Seattle the next day. My apartment feels different now. Not like a place I'm hiding, but like a place I chose. My job feels different too. When I help tourists understand the history of the places they visit, I think about the importance of knowing the difference between real history and the stories we tell ourselves. 3 months later, I get a call from the Park Service. There's an opening for a supervisory position at Denali National Park. It's a promotion, a chance to help other rangers deal with the strange things they sometimes encounter in the wilderness. I take the job because I've learned something important from my time at the family homestead. There are things in this world that feed on our pain, our guilt, our regret. They tell us we deserve to suffer, that we're responsible for things beyond our control. They make us believe that love means staying trapped, that loyalty means accepting abuse, that family means never being allowed to grow. But they're wrong. Real love sets you free. Real family wants you to be happy, even if that happiness takes you far away from home. And real healing comes from understanding the difference between guilt that teaches us and guilt that destroys us. I still think about my family every day, but now I remember the good times. Mom teaching me to bake cookies, Danny helping me build a tree fort, Dad showing me how to read animal tracks in the snow. I remember the love, not just the pain. And sometimes, late at night in my new apartment in Fairbanks, I swear I can smell lavender and coffee, wood smoke, and Dad's old aftershave. But it doesn't scare me anymore, because now I know the difference between memory and haunting, between love and possession, between the dead who rest in peace and the things that pretend to be them. My name is Margaret Sullivan, and I'm a park ranger. I protect wild places and help people understand their history. I've seen things in the wilderness that most people wouldn't believe. Bears that walk like men, voices in the wind, shadows that move wrong. But the most dangerous thing I ever encountered wasn't in the wilderness at all. It was in a house that looked like home, wearing the faces of the people I loved most. And the most important thing I learned wasn't about the supernatural or about ancient predators that feed on human emotion. It was about forgiveness. Sometimes the person you most need to forgive is yourself. My name is Samuel Northcott, and I've been a park ranger for 31 years. That's longer than anyone else in Alaska. When people ask me why I stayed so long in the wilderness, I tell them it's because the land needs someone to watch over it. What I don't tell them is that sometimes the land watches back. It was December 15th, 1999, 2 weeks before the new millennium. Everyone was worried about Y2K, about computers crashing and planes falling from the sky. I was sitting in my ranger station in Gates of the Arctic National Park, listening to the wind howl across the Brooks Range, when my radio crackled to life. Northcott, this is Anchorage Dispatch. We need you to coordinate emergency response for all northern Alaska parks. We've got situations. The voice belonged to Director Martinez. In 20 years of knowing him, I'd never heard him sound scared. But he did now. What kind of situations? I asked, reaching for my logbook. Reports are coming in from every park in the state, rangers going missing, weird animal behavior, some kind of incidents at sacred sites. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Not the kind of cold you get from Alaska winter. A different kind entirely. How many parks are we talking about? All of them, Samuel. Every single one. Through my station window, I could see the endless white of the Arctic wilderness. I'd spent my whole adult life out here. I knew every trail, every valley, every hidden place where the old Inupiat elders said spirits lived. My wife Sarah used to joke that I loved this land more than I loved her. Maybe she was right. After she died 5 years ago, this wilderness was all I had left. I'll need helicopter transport to coordinate properly, I said. Already arranged. Pilot's name is Jake Morrison. He'll be there in 2 hours. The radio went quiet, except for static. I walked to my equipment locker and started packing. Emergency rations, first aid kit, flare gun, my grandfather's hunting rifle. The rifle had been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather always said it had special power because it was blessed by a medicine man. I used to think that was just old stories. Now I wasn't so sure. Outside, the wind was getting stronger. But there was something wrong with the sound it made. Instead of the usual howl across the mountains, it sounded almost like voices. Like hundreds of people whispering just below hearing. I checked my thermometer. -40 degrees. Normal for December. But the cold felt different tonight. It seemed to reach right through my walls, through my heavy coat, straight into my bones. My satellite phone rang. The display showed a number I didn't recognize. Samuel Northcott. Ranger Northcott, this is Dr. Elena Vasquez from the University of Alaska. I'm calling about the animal behavior reports from your area. What about them? We're seeing things that shouldn't be possible. Caribou, moving in perfect circles for hours. Wolves refusing to eat fresh kills. Birds flying directly into mountains like they can't see them. And the migration patterns. She paused. Every animal in northern Alaska is running south. All of them. I looked out my window again. Now that she mentioned it, I hadn't seen a single track in the snow around my station for days. Usually there were fox prints, rabbit trails, the occasional wolf sign, nothing. Doctor, what do you think is causing this? I don't know. But 30 years of studying Arctic wildlife tells me that when every animal in a region suddenly runs away, humans should probably follow. After she hung up, I made coffee and sat at my desk. I pulled out the old journal my predecessor had left behind when he retired. Ranger Tom Blackhorse had worked this territory for 25 years before me. Most of his entries were routine, weather reports, visitor counts, maintenance notes, but scattered throughout were stranger things. Asterisk June 12th. 1967. Found circle of dead trees arranged in perfect spiral pattern. Trees appear to have died overnight. No disease or insect damage visible. Asterisk, asterisk. August 3rd. 1969. Hikers report hearing voices calling their names from empty valleys. Investigated. Found no human presence for 50 miles in any direction. Asterisk, asterisk. October 31st, 1973. Something is moving in the mountains tonight. And hear it from my station. Sounds like it's the size of a building, but moving as quiet as smoke. Staying inside until dawn. Asterisk. The most disturbing entry was from his final year. Asterisk. March 15th, 1974. The old boundaries are weakening. Elder Joseph Kanguk warned me this might happen. He says, the hungry ones have been waiting a long time. When the barriers fall, they will come through hungry enough to eat the world. Someone will have to stand guard. Someone who knows the land well enough to become part of it. Asterisk, I heard helicopter rotors in the distance. Jake Morrison was early. I grabbed my pack and headed outside. The helicopter was landing in the clearing behind my station, snow swirling up in clouds. Morrison was a good pilot. I'd flown with him before on search and rescue operations. Evening, Samuel, he called over the engine noise. Hell of a night for flying. Thanks for coming out in this weather. No problem. Though I got to say, this whole situation has everyone spooked. My dispatcher got 3 emergency calls just during my flight up here. Park rangers from Denali, Glacier Bay, and Kobuk Valley all reporting the same thing. Which is, people disappearing. And not just lost hikers. I'm talking about experienced outdoorsmen who know the country better than their own backyard. Vanishing without a trace. As we lifted off, I looked down at my station growing smaller below. It had been my home for over 30 years. Something told me I'd never see it again. The helicopter flew south through the night, and with every mile we traveled, I could feel something enormous stirring behind us in the darkness. We landed at the Emergency Coordination Center in Fairbanks just after midnight. The place was chaos. Rangers, state troopers, National Guard personnel, and scientists crowded around radio stations and computer terminals. Director Martinez met us at the door. Thank God you're here, Samuel. It's getting worse by the hour. He led me to a large map of Alaska covered in red pins. Each pin marked a location where something had gone wrong. Show me what we're dealing with, I said. Martinez pointed to the northern regions. It started 3 days ago at sacred sites across the Arctic. Inupiat burial grounds, traditional hunting areas, places the elders have always said were dangerous. Rangers went to investigate reports of strange lights and sounds. Most never came back. What happened to the ones who did come back? That's the problem. The few who returned. They're not right anymore. They won't eat. They stare at people like they're hungry, but not for food. And they keep talking about voices, calling them back to the wilderness. A young scientist approached our table. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Ranger Northcott, I'm Dr. Sarah Chen from the Geological Survey. We've been monitoring seismic activity across the state. What we're seeing doesn't match any natural phenomenon. She showed me a computer printout covered in jagged lines. These readings suggest the ground itself is shifting, but not like an earthquake, more like something underneath is trying to push through. Push through from where? That's what has us all confused. The readings indicate the disturbance is coming from below, but our deepest soil samples show permafrost going down hundreds of feet. There shouldn't be anything down there but frozen ground. Martinez called me over to another table where a Native American man in his 70s sat drinking coffee. His weathered hands shook slightly as he held the cup. "Samuel, this is Elder Joseph Konguk. He's been trying to tell us something important." The old man looked up at me with eyes that had seen too much. "You're the one who took over Tom Blackhorse's territory," he said in accented English. "Yes, sir." "Did you know Ranger Blackhorse?" Tom was a good man. He listened when the old ones tried to warn him. Most white men don't listen to stories they think are just superstition. Joseph's voice grew quiet. But Tom understood that some stories are warnings. What kind of warnings? My grandfather's grandfather told stories about the time before time, when the hungry ones lived between worlds, always trying to break through to ours. The spirits of the land kept them away for thousands of years. But the barriers weaken when people forget the old ways. Joseph stood and walked to the map. He pointed to each red pin with a gnarled finger. "These places, all of them, are where my people made offerings to keep the barriers strong. We haven't made proper offerings in decades. The young people moved to cities. The old ceremonies were forgotten." "So what are these hungry ones?" I asked. "They look like people, but they're not. They eat everything. Animals, plants, people. But what they really eat is the life force itself. They won't stop until everything is empty." Dr. Chen interrupted. "With respect, sir, we need to focus on scientific explanations." Joseph smiled sadly. "Young lady, in 3 days you'll understand that science and spirit are the same thing. The question is whether you'll understand it in time to do something about it." A radio operator across the room suddenly stood up, his face pale. "Director Martinez, we're getting reports from Denali. Ranger Station went silent 2 hours ago. Search and rescue found the building empty, but what? All the windows and doors were open from the inside. Like, whoever was in there wanted to let something in. And they found footprints in the snow leading away from the station. Dozens of them. But they don't look human." Martinez grabbed his jacket. "Samuel, I need you to coordinate the northern response while I head south to Denali. What about the missing rangers? Find them if you can. But if Elder Kanguk is right about these hungry ones, finding them might not be a blessing." I spent the next 4 hours on the radio, trying to reach ranger stations across northern Alaska. Most didn't respond at all. The few that did answer gave reports that made less sense each time. Kobuk Valley reported that the aurora borealis was shining even though there was no solar activity. The lights were the wrong color too, deep red instead of the usual green. Lake Clark said their emergency supplies had been arranged in strange patterns overnight. Canned food stacked in spirals. First aid equipment laid out in symbols that none of them recognized. Most disturbing was the call from no attack. Ranger Bill Sullivan had been stationed there for 15 years. I knew him well. He was solid, reliable, not given to panic. "Samuel, something's wrong with the caribou herd that winters near here," he said, his voice tight with fear. "There are thousands of them, but they're all standing perfectly still. They've been that way for 6 hours. No movement, no sound. And their eyes. What about their eyes, Bill? They're all looking in the same direction, north, toward your territory. Get out of there, Bill. Leave the station and drive south." I tried. "My truck won't start, radio's going dead too." "Samuel, if something happens to me, tell my wife." The transmission cut to static. Elder Kanguk appeared at my shoulder. I hadn't heard him approach. "The calling has begun," he said quietly. "They're gathering the herds first. Animals are easier to control than people, but soon they'll come for us too. How do we stop them? You can't stop them, but you might be able to seal them away again, the way the old guardians did." "What guardians?" "Men who loved the land so much they became part of it. Their spirits still watch the boundaries. But they're old and tired. They need someone to take their place." Through the coordination center windows, I could see the first light of dawn creeping across the sky. But something was wrong with the light too. Instead of the clean white of winter sunrise, it had a sick yellow tinge, like the color of infection. "How long do we have?" I asked. Joseph looked toward the north, where my territory lay hidden beyond the mountains. "They're coming through tonight. By tomorrow morning, it will be too late to stop them. Then we need to get back up there." "Yes, but Samuel, if we go back, not all of us will come home as the people we are now." I thought about my empty ranger station, about 31 years of protecting a PO. wilderness that had shaped my entire life. About my wife Sarah, buried in the small cemetery in Fairbanks, who used to say, "I belong to Alaska more than I belong to her." Maybe she was right. Maybe it was time to find out what that really meant. Jake Morrison flew us north as the sick yellow dawn spread across Alaska. Elder Kanguk sat in the back of the helicopter, chanting quietly in Inupiat. The old man had insisted on coming despite his age. "You'll need someone who knows the old ceremonies," he'd said. "And I'm the last one left who remembers them properly." As we flew deeper into the wilderness, the wrongness became impossible to ignore. Entire forests stood leafless and dead, though they'd been healthy just days before. Rivers had frozen solid despite the underground springs that normally kept them flowing all winter. Most disturbing were the animal trails we could see from the air. Thousands of tracks, all leading in the same direction, toward the heart of my Widgis territory. "Jesus Christ," Morrison said over the radio. "Look at that." He pointed northeast toward the Brooks Range. Above the mountains, the sky was the wrong color. Instead of the deep blue of Arctic winter, it showed patches of sickly green, like an infected wound in the atmosphere itself. "That's not the northern lights," Morrison said. "I've been flying in Alaska for 20 years. I've never seen anything like that." "It's the barriers breaking down," Elder Kunguk said. "The hungry ones are pushing through from their world into ours." We landed at a clearing 5 miles from my ranger station. Morrison shut down the engine, but he kept looking nervously at the sky. "I don't like this, Samuel. Something feels wrong about this whole area. My instruments were going crazy during the approach." "What do you mean?" "Compass spinning in circles, GPS showing impossible coordinates, and the radio." He tried the radio. Nothing but static filled with what sounded almost like whispers. I shouldered my pack and checked my grandfather's rifle one more time. "Jake, I want you to fly back to Fairbanks. Get as far south as you can. I'm not leaving you two out here." "That's not a request. If things go bad, someone needs to warn the outside world what's happening." Morrison looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my voice stopped him. "How will I know if things went bad?" Elder Kunguk answered. "If the lights in the sky turn red, everything north of the Yukon River will be lost. Fly south and tell people to keep flying." We hiked through the snow toward my station. The forest was completely silent. No bird calls, no wind in the trees, no sounds of small animals moving through the underbrush. Just our footsteps crunching in snow that seemed to glow faintly in the weird light from above. "Joseph," I said as we walked, "tell me about these guardians you mentioned. Long ago, when the hungry ones first tried to break through, some men volunteered to become permanent watchers. They gave up their human lives to become spirits bound to the land itself. Their job was to guard the weak places, where the barriers between worlds grow thin. What happened to them? They're still here, still watching, but they've been alone for so long, and the barriers have grown so weak that they can't hold much longer. They need someone to join them. Someone with strong connection to this place." We reached my ranger station just as the sun set behind the mountains. The building looked normal from the outside, but something felt wrong. The front door stood slightly open, though I always kept it locked when I was away. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it, except for one thing. My desk calendar had been turned to a date that didn't exist. December 32nd, 1999. Written in the margin was a message in handwriting I didn't recognize. Asterisk, the time between times. When old boundaries fail, come to the sacred grove if you would save your world. Asterisk, how far is the sacred grove? I asked Joseph. 3 miles north. It's where the barriers are thinnest. If they're going to break through completely, that's where it will happen. We left the station and hiked through increasingly strange terrain. Trees grew in perfect geometric patterns. Rocks were arranged in spirals and symbols that hurt to look at directly. Worst of all were the sounds. Distant howling that might have been wind, but carried too much intelligence to be natural. The sacred grove was a circle of ancient spruce trees surrounding a small clearing. As we approached, I could see lights moving between the trees. Not flashlights or campfires, but something that glowed with its own sick luminescence. "Stay behind me," I whispered to Joseph. We crept to the edge of the clearing and looked through the trees. What I saw there will stay with me until the day I die, and probably longer. In the center of the clearing, the ground had been torn open, not dug or excavated, but ripped apart like fabric. Through the hole, I could see into another place entirely, a world where the sky was black and the ground was covered with bones. Moving through that alien landscape were things that might have been human once, but had been twisted into something else. They walked on all fours, their limbs stretched impossibly long, their faces elongated into wolf-like snouts filled with too many teeth. But the worst part was their eyes. They looked intelligent, hungry, and completely aware of us watching them. One of the creatures climbed out of the hole into our world, then another, then dozens. They moved with inhuman grace through the snow, testing the air like predators seeking prey. "We're too late," Joseph whispered. "They're already coming through." The creatures suddenly stopped moving and turned toward our hiding place. Every single one of them was looking directly at us. "Run," I said. We crashed through the forest, branches tearing at our clothes. Behind us, I could hear the creatures following. They moved without sound, which somehow made it worse than if they had been howling or snarling. Joseph stumbled and fell. I helped him up, but we both knew he couldn't run much farther. "Samuel," he gasped, "you have to do the ceremony without me. Bind yourself to the land, become a guardian." "I don't know how." "Love it enough to never leave. That's all the ceremony really is. Love this place enough to give up everything else." I looked back toward the sacred grove. The sickly light was spreading, and I could see more creatures pouring through the hole in reality. Soon there would be hundreds, then thousands. What about the people in the villages? In Fairbanks? If the barriers fall completely, there won't be any people left anywhere. These things won't stop until they've consumed everything in our world. Then they'll move on to the next. I thought about my 31 years in this wilderness. Every sunrise I'd watched from my station windows. Every animal track I'd followed through fresh snow. Every quiet night when the land felt like it was sharing its secrets with me. I thought about Sarah, buried in Fairbanks, who had always said I belonged to Alaska more than I belonged to her. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was time to make that belonging official. The creatures were getting closer. I could hear them moving through the trees, no longer bothering to be silent. They knew we couldn't escape. Joseph collapsed against a large spruce tree, breathing heavily. Blood ran from cuts on his face where branches had scratched him during our flight. "How do I become a guardian?" I asked him. "You have to go back to the sacred grove. Stand in the center where the worlds meet. Offer yourself to the land completely, body, mind, and spirit. The old guardians will accept you if your love for this place is true." What happens then? Your human body dies. Your consciousness becomes part of the wilderness itself. You'll be able to close the barriers, but you'll never be able to leave this place again, never be able to be human again. Through the trees, I could see the creatures surrounding us. They moved like shadows with teeth, patient as predators, who knew their prey had nowhere to go. One of them stepped into the small clearing where we'd stopped. In the strange light from the torn sky, I could see it clearly for the first time. It had been human once. I could tell from the remnants of clothing hanging from its stretched frame. But something had changed it, twisted it into a thing of pure hunger. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth, and it spoke in a voice like wind through dead leaves. "Samuel Northcott, 31 years in the wilderness. You love this land enough to die for it. That's exactly what we need. What do you want? We want you to become one of us, to help us spread across your world. You know every trail, every hidden valley, every place where people might hide. With your knowledge, we could consume everything in weeks instead of years." "Never. Look around you, human. We're already here. Your barriers have failed. Your guardians are weak and old. Nothing can stop us now." From the creature's mouth came a sound like laughter, but wrong, too hungry, too cold. "We've consumed 1,000 worlds. Turn their protectors into our servants. Your world will be no different." Joseph struggled to his feet beside me. Despite his age and exhaustion, his voice was strong. "You're wrong. This guardian won't serve you. He'll destroy you. Old man, your ceremonies are just superstition. Your guardians are myths. We are real. We are here. We are hungry. Then you don't know what real love can do." I raised my grandfather's rifle and fired at the creature. The bullet passed right through it, without effect. It laughed again. Weapons can't harm us, Ranger. We exist between the spaces of your reality. Only spiritual force can touch us. More creatures emerged from the shadows. Dozens of them, all twisted versions of people they had once been. I recognized some faces, Rangers who had gone missing over the past few days. They looked at me with eyes that held both hunger and terrible awareness of what they had become. "Join us willingly," the first creature said, "and we'll make your transformation pleasant. Resist, and we'll tear your mind apart before we change your body." I thought about Morrison flying south toward Fairbanks, about Director Martinez coordinating rescue efforts from his office, about all the people who had no idea that reality itself was under attack. "Joseph," I said quietly, "if I become a guardian, can I save them all? If you're strong enough, if your love for this place is deeper than their hunger." I looked around at the place, wilderness that had been my home for 3 decades. Every tree, every stone, every breath of cold air felt familiar. This land had shaped me, taught me, given my life meaning. Sarah had been right. I did belong to Alaska more than I belonged to anywhere else. I have to go back to the grove. "We'll stop you," the creature said. "No," Joseph replied. "You'll try." The old man began chanting in Inupiat, the same words he'd been repeating in the helicopter. The creatures recoiled as if the language itself was painful to them. "Run, Samuel. I'll hold them as long as I can." I crashed through the forest toward the sacred grove. Behind me, I heard Joseph's chanting turn to screams, then to silence. The old man had bought me time with his life. I reached the edge of the grove as the hole in reality grew wider. More creatures were pouring through from their dead world, and I could see other holes opening in the distance. The barriers between worlds weren't just breaking, they were collapsing entirely. In the center of the clearing, where the hole was deepest, I could see shapes moving. Not the twisted creatures, but something else. Older, sadder, the spirits of men who had made the same choice I was about to make, countless years ago. "Are you the guardians?" I called out. A voice answered from everywhere and nowhere at once. "We are what remains of those who chose duty over life, who chose love over self. Are you ready to join us?" Around the grove, the creatures gathered. Hundreds of them now, all watching and waiting. They knew what I was planning, and they knew they couldn't stop me without entering the grove themselves. And something about that sacred space still held enough power to keep them at bay. "If I do this," I said, "will the barriers hold? With our combined strength and yours, yes. But the price is everything you are, and everything you might have been." I thought about Sarah one last time, about the life we'd set her, planned before cancer took her. About growing old together, maybe retiring to somewhere warmer, but those dreams had died with her 5 years ago. Since then, all I'd had was the wilderness. All I'd wanted was to protect it. "I'm ready." I walked to the center of the grove, above the hole where worlds met. The air itself felt alive here, charged with forces beyond human understanding. "I offer myself," I said to the waiting spirits. "My body to nourish the land. My mind to guard the boundaries. My spirit to watch eternal." The world exploded into light. Pain beyond description tore through every cell in my body as my human form began to dissolve. But beneath the pain was something else. A connection to everything around me that I'd never felt before. I could sense every tree root extending deep into the earth, every stream flowing beneath winter ice, every bird that had ever nested in these mountains. My consciousness expanded until it encompassed the entire northern Alaska wilderness. I could feel the creatures retreating as barriers of pure spiritual energy rose around them. The holes between worlds began to seal, reality healing itself like a wound closing. The twisted beings that had once been missing, rangers and hikers, tried to flee back to their alien world, but it was too late. As the dimensional tiers closed, they were caught between realities and simply ceased. Through eyes that were no longer physical, I watched the sick yellow light fade from the sky. The aurora borealis returned to its normal green glow. In the distance, I could sense animals beginning to return to the wilderness. Caribou cautiously moving north again, wolves emerging from caves where they had hidden, birds returning to empty nests. The immediate crisis was over. The invasion had been stopped. But I understood now why the old guardians had grown weak. This wasn't a job that would end when the current threat was defeated. The hungry ones would try again, in 100 years or 1,000. They would probe the barriers, looking for weakness, testing the resolve of those who stood watch. And I would be here, waiting for them. I tried to contact Morrison's helicopter radio, to let him know the danger had passed. But I found I could no longer affect the physical world directly. My consciousness existed in the space between spirits and matter. I could protect and watch, but I could not communicate with the human world I had left behind. 3 days later, Morrison returned with a search team. They found Joseph's body in the forest, and they found my discarded pack and rifle near the sacred grove. The official report would say that Ranger Samuel Northcott died in the line of duty, probably from exposure during the unprecedented weather event that had affected northern Alaska. They never found my body. The search teams also reported that the strange animal behavior had stopped as suddenly as it had started. Rangers who had gone missing were found wandering in the woods with no memory of where they had been. The geological disturbances ceased. The emergency was over, though no one could explain exactly what had caused it. Director Martinez attended my memorial service in Fairbanks. I was there too, watching from the edge between worlds as they lowered an empty coffin into the ground next to Sarah's grave. Morrison spoke about my dedication to the wilderness. Several of the rangers I had worked with shared stories of my 31 years of service. If they had been able to see me, they would have known that my service had not ended. It had just begun. Now, 26 years later, I still stand watch. The barriers remain strong. The hungry ones probe them sometimes, testing for weakness, but they have not been able to break through again. Other guardians have joined me over the decades, men and women who loved wild places enough to give up their human lives to protect them. We don't speak much to each other. We don't need to. We share the same eternal purpose, to keep the darkness on its side of reality. Sometimes hikers or researchers passing through my territory report strange experiences. They see lights moving through the forest at night. They hear voices warning them away from dangerous areas. They find themselves guided safely back to trails when they become lost. They don't know they're seeing us, the guardians, the men and women who chose love over life, duty over self. But I know something that the living don't. There are worse things than death. There is the death of everything you love while you're powerless to stop it. There is the slow corruption of beauty into hunger, of wonder into fear. I chose to prevent that. We all did. And if the hungry ones ever try to break through again, they'll find us waiting. The wilderness is never unguarded. It never will be. My name was Samuel Northcott. I was a park ranger for 31 years. Now I am something more. And I am watching. Always watching.